The hamster's running.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 2026 Virginia Cannabis Conference. I'm Tamara Netzel, and I'm here to share with you Cannabis, a Gateway to Healing. So, I joined NORML in 2017. I gave testimony for the medical cannabis legislation we have now in Virginia by sharing how cannabis helps my multiple sclerosis. I was diagnosed with MS at the age of 43. But I was 47 years old before I could really say that I consumed cannabis. I was so inspired by how cannabis had helped me and angry at the same time, right? Angry because I felt betrayed that this medicine was kept from me and countless others because of the criminalization. I'm one, just say no. You know, I grew up with just say no and didn't know the criminalization history growing up. It was a surprise to me when I learned it. So I was curious about the stories of people who had been arrested for what was now my medicine. So I began listening to and publishing stories, individual stories of people criminalized for cannabis, in an effort to bring awareness. Some of you may know me from my work in the nonprofit that I created. And this is it here. And this is a diagram of kind of what got me started, the things that interest me. It was the consequences, and I called my nonprofit cruel consequences, of what happens to you, individuals, when they get a cannabis charge. And these are all the things, pieces of your life that you could lose. Okay, so I was extremely interested in people's stories, and so I sought out people who had criminal charges, and just wanted to know how it happened, what their sentences were, and just. I've written books. I've written 2 books, and now I'm doing video series, and just sharing these stories. You know, it's now been 8 years since I joined NORML, and I'm here to tell you how it's helped me heal, just by being among people who know about the plant. So I have some thoughts about where we are today, reflecting back on these last 8 years. Cannabis didn't just give me relief. It was a gateway allowing me access to so many other things to help me heal. It helped me with neurological pain, with MS. But then beyond this, cannabis made me brave enough for me to be able to have make medical decisions that I never would have made if I wasn't brave. Like choosing to, in 2019, to go to Mexico for a stem cell transplant to treat my MS. And I'm happy to say I am 6 years progression-free with MS. So, you know, when I reflect on all of this, cannabis was part of that. I never would have been able to make it through that procedure without cannabis, honestly. And I know other people who have had the same procedure that there's a cannabis was there for them throughout. And if you don't know about stem cell transplant, ask me later, but it involves chemo. I lost my hair, everything. So I have some pictures here. This is of us in DC. But you can see here, a couple years ago, this was 2020. I had just come back in December of 2019. I had the stem cell transplant, and you see I'm bald because I had chemo. The stem cell transplant involves chemo, and you lose your hair just like, you know, any chemo treatment. But so far it's worked for 6 years, and I'm very, very happy. So once you understand that cannabis as a gateway to healing, another truth becomes impossible to ignore. the way we talk about cannabis. Medical versus adult use, recreational. It doesn't reflect how people actually use cannabis. When people use cannabis to sleep, calm their anxiety, soften the pain, that's medicine. And that's also adult use. So to me, I don't know the difference anymore, honestly. I'm a patient, and I come from to cannabis for medical, right? But I'm really looking forward to an adult use market in Virginia. Because to me, for a patient, that gives us more options. It gives us more choice. I grow my own cannabis, and I know that it's even hard to find, to find the right cultivar just for you, that really, so there's that searching. But if there's something that works for me, and I don't necessarily want to put the energy into growing, I want to be able to find it somewhere, right? So, patient choice. So, what I've always loved about cannabis is that it gives this patient choice, and it gives you ownership over your own health. Otherwise, you're going to a doctor to ask permission to get things, right? I love that I've been able to tweak my routine here and there, and I just got done telling somebody, they're like, oh, what are you doing? And I was like, these days, I know I got my 5 cannabinoids, right? And that's what I consume every day, I got my DHC, got my CBD, CBC, got my CBG, and the CBN, right? And when they really isolate another one, I'll be on to that one too. But these, I am better than ever because of this. Instead of, one prescription, one path, cannabis invites people to pay attention to their own bodies, their own symptoms, their needs, and then make informed decisions for their own health. Right? That's why I care so deeply about our choices as consumers. A well-regulated retail market gives people more options to take ownership of their own health. That reality is why I wrote Humans of Cannabis. This is my second book. This book exists to put the people behind these experiences, the patients, the consumers, the lived stories back at the center of the conversation. Because policies, markets, business plans are meaningless if they don't serve the humans who rely on this plant to survive, to heal, and to live fully. So in my book of Humans of Cannabis, there are 52 different profiles of people who consume cannabis, grow it, and whatnot. So please come to my table later. 2 o'clock I will be having a book signing. You can purchase my book. You can, and get it signed here today. So please come visit me in the expo hall. What interests me wasn't just cannabis use itself when I wrote this book. In the book, I shared the stories of who used cannabis and their turning point. People who didn't disengage from their lives, but leaned into them. So just one of those 52 stories that I want to share with you is one of Janine. So Janine's story really is about healing, family trauma healing. Okay. She had a number of spinal surgeries and was in terrible pain. And the way she was living, she was very, very angry, and really didn't, she and her daughter had a very troubled relationship. They didn't get along. Daughter introduced cannabis to her. Now that she's in cannabis, she talks about how her and her daughter have been able to really have a true relationship and the way it should be, because she's a happy person. How many of you know somebody like that, or that might be you? You became a happier person because, yeah. Right, okay. Now I want to talk about this story. This is Dustin. Dustin, and a lot of these people are in Virginia. You may even recognize some of them if you come by and see the book. But this is Dustin in Northern Virginia. Dustin has cerebral palsy. He lives in federal housing. Okay. This is a person that is left out of everything we've done so far. When Virginia went legal, he tried to grow in this federal housing, and of course, eventually got told no. So he would like to grow his own. He can't. Federal housing. He also, because of his situation, cannot afford cannabis. Okay, so this is somebody that really has been left out. Okay, and somebody that needs that medicine. And we're even talking about consumption because he cannot even consume in his place. So what you see right now, that's what he does. He rolls around in his chair, and he smokes outside with his dog, Tia. And the third story I want to share with you, some of you might recognize who this person is, right? This is Keith Strock, founder of National NORML. So in the book, I actually, each of the 52 stories, I state their age. Keith is 80 years old. And that was a fascinating interview. If you get any time to look into and do a rabbit hole dive into Keith Strock, it's fascinating. So I encourage you to do that. So different people, different paths, different outcomes, but the pattern's the same. Cannabis did not shrink their lives, right? It only expanded their lives. And that's what Humans of Cannabis, my book, is all about. Not just cannabis as a product, but people as decision makers and consumers. And if you recognize yourself in any of these stories, so I hope that you do. So Virginia passed bills, but legislation is not finish line. The next phase is about how cannabis is understood, accessed, and integrated into wellness and community life. That's where advocacy comes in. If you've ever felt judged, dismissed, or silenced as a patient, you already understand why this matters. And that's why I want to be very clear. Lobby Day's Monday, how many of you are coming? Please raise your hands. Thank you. And I encourage you, I know the weather is upon us here, but if you are in town, please, please, please come to Lobby Day.
I think you got moved to the second.
Do what?
I think you got moved to the second.
Got moved to the second?
That's what, I could be completely wrong, sorry.
Okay, so I know our Lobby Day is still happening on Monday.
Okay, my bad.
Okay, oh, you must be speaking, okay, thank you. I was like, news to me, okay. Yeah, so please come, please, if you want to use this QR code, you can sign up directly right now. You know, if you want to catch me later, you can sign up for that. So please register, show up, and tell your story. I just told you my story. And the many stories that I've collected, it makes a difference, your story does. It really does. Because, and I tell people this all the time, is I might have a story and it might, you know, and I might be able to convince one person, but you in your situation, you will convince somebody I will never be able to touch. Okay? So it takes all of us. It really does. Okay. And this is how patients and consumers can shape the industry. Right? So what I want to introduce to you today are some practices that really are that next stepping stone, right? So what's after cannabis, right? It doesn't end at cannabis. Healing doesn't end at cannabis. It's what you are able to do. What has cannabis enabled you to do, right? So I am gonna step away here, and I brought two practitioners here to share some healing practices with you. And I'd like you to participate. you get to participate in your chair, okay? So it's chair yoga, and I have Shannon, what's your last name? Somogyi. So it's Shannon Somogyi of Mobile OM Yoga and Wellness, and she's going to share some things with us.
Hello, everybody. I can project my voice pretty good because I do this quite often for large groups. So is everybody can hear me pretty good? Good? Okay, I think they do want me to use a mic for the live stream.
You don't need to project.
Okay.
We'll do it for you.
All right, so thank you guys for coming out today. I am a local holistic practitioner with many different modalities under my belt. An avid cannabis supporter. My husband and I own a few stores in the area. Culture, which has been around since '99, and Cultivate Wellness, we opened in 2018. Anyway, we appreciate everybody's support coming up. Hopefully you'll come to the lobby days and help Virginians get the access to this beautiful plant medicine. We're going to do just a short little chair yoga session. I know you guys all just ate lunch, so we're not going to do too much stuff. Don't worry, you're not going to be standing on your heads or anything like that. And I highly encourage you to try. And like Tamara said, this is really a practice that's accessible to everyone. You don't even have to get out of your chair to do it. So we felt this would be the right one for today. We're going to go ahead and get started. So I'd like for you to maybe push your chair away from your table just a little bit, and then come to sit at the end of your seat. So just at the edge of your seat, where I like to keep you. All right, and then from here, I want you to sit up nice and tall. Let's take your shoulders, roll them forward and up to the ears. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Exhale, roll them back and down. Good. Pinching those shoulder blades gently together on your back, leaving your heart lifted. I'd like to invite you to leave your hands in your lap, palms down for more grounding, or palms up for more energy. I'd also like to invite you to close your eyes, but only if you're comfortable with it. And we'll just take a minute here just to ground and center. So take a moment to just kind of arrive in this new seated position. Gently push aside any agendas or to-do lists. Maybe your head is spinning about what you need from the grocery store or something like that. Just gently push aside any to-do list. Leave them outside of the room. You can pick them up on your way out if you wish, but bringing your awareness to the present moment. Take a moment to bring your attention to any sound that you hear. As you notice these sounds, acknowledge each one and then let it pass, like clouds in the sky. Next, begin to bring that awareness into your physical body, taking a moment to just kind of scan from head to toe, noticing how your body feels in this moment. Take any mental notes of areas in the body that need extra attention, whether that's a past injury or something current. And just remind yourself to be gentle. Back out of a pose or a stretch if it's too intense. And then lastly, and most importantly, bring your awareness to your breath. Don't change it. Just observe without judgment. Breathing in and out of the nose if it's available. You may begin to notice that the breath has slowed without any effort. Now we'll put a little effort in and begin to deepen each inhalation and lengthen each exhalation. Flowing from one breath to the next, no pauses in between. This will be your breath throughout our practice. If at any point your mind begins to wander, just come back here. Just breathe. Let's bring our hands together at our heart center. Most of us know this as prayer. In yoga, we call it Anjali Mudra or prayer pose. And we'll set an intention. Just for our short practice today, your intention can be something you'd like to work on, or perhaps let go of. Or maybe it's a dedication to someone in your life who needs extra love, light, or guidance. And remember, that can be you. So as you set this intention, press the palms together, take a deep inhale, lift your hands over your head. You can open your eyes, take the gaze up if it's comfortable for the neck. As you exhale, pull the hands back to the heart. Good. Still sitting nice and tall, pressing that crown of the head to the ceiling, keeping the spine nice and long. Go ahead and drop your chin to your chest. Notice any sensations at the back of the neck. Again, just observe, no judgment. On your next inhale, gently roll that right ear over to the right shoulder. As you exhale, take the chin down and all the way to the left. We'll do that 2 more times. Inhale to the right. Exhale to the left. Last one. And then on your next inhale, bring it back to center. Exhale here. On your next inhale, take your gaze all the way up to the ceiling. You can open the eyes if it's okay. Stretching out from the chin to your clavicle, the collarbones. If you'd like a deeper stretch here, you can open the mouth. Take the bottom jaw, reach it out and up like an underbite, and you'll feel that deep stretch from the chin to the neck. This will tap into that throat chakra as well, which we all need during this legislative session, right? And then when you're ready, slowly release that head back down to center. You can release your hands down by your side. We'll go ahead and do a couple more of those shoulder rolls. Inhale the shoulders forward and up. Exhale back and down. Good. I like y'all's breathing. You're doing really good with that. Good. Last one. Leaving those shoulders back and down. We'll start with that right arm. If some of you are sitting close to someone, just be mindful. I don't want anybody smacking your neighbor. So maybe what we'll do is we'll take the hands forward. So you still may be close to the table, so just be mindful of that. So whether you're able to breathe and reach your arm out to the side, or maybe you can go up, reaching nice and tall. Spread those fingers wide, just the right hand. Good, reach nice and tall, lengthening through the side body. When you're ready to exhale, lean over to the left. Keep your hips grounded. You don't want that right hip lifting up. Coming into some lateral flexion here, opening up through those intercostal muscles in the ribs. And on your next inhale, come back to center, stretch it out again, like you could tickle the ceiling, and then exhale, release. Good. Inhale, the left arm comes up. Nice and tall. Exhale, over to the side. Stay with your breath. And inhale, come back to center. Again, stretching tall. Exhale, release that hand down. Good. On your next inhale, both arms are going to come up. So forgive me, I'm just doing one because I got to hold this mic. Good. Now, as you exhale, release the hands. Separate them. Good. And you're going to exhale, twist to the right. So your right hand will just come behind you. Maybe it grabs that seat on the chair or the back. And then the front hand's going to go to the opposite knee. Let's inhale again to lengthen out through the spine, sitting nice and tall. As you exhale, take your gaze and look behind you. You want to keep this twist nice and gentle. When we're seated, our lumbar spine is stabilized and we don't have a lot of flexibility there. So you don't really want to crank this one out. On your next inhale, let's release that. Sweep the arms back up. This time as you exhale, we're going to go to the other side. Twisting to the left. Right hand to the opposite knee. And we do twist normally in our yoga practice at the beginning to help open up and create space. Twists are great for digestion. I know a lot of y'all just ate, so you're welcome. When you're ready, inhale, release those arms back up to the ceiling. Now walk your feet apart so you have a little bit of space. Knees are wider than the hips. As you exhale, we're going to fold forward. So again, maybe your arms just come on the chair. You can release your head down if you'd like. If you have the room and you can release all the way down, great. If you can do the latter, go ahead and release that head down. Shake out the head, yes. Tell somebody no. And then shake it yes again, because I like to leave things on a positive note. When you're ready, we're going to slowly bring the hands to the knees so you can use that to press yourself back up as you inhale, coming back up nice and tall. Good. Now we have those knees already wide. We're just going to start making circles. So it's like you're taking your spine is like a spoon in a bowl and you're just stirring it up. And then we'll try to bring the breath in with it. So inhaling as you come forward, exhaling as you come back. Just one more in this direction. And then we'll switch directions. Inhaling as you come forward, exhaling as you come back. Just a couple times here, loosening up the low back, the hips. And then come back to that nice tall seat. From here, we'll go into our cat and cow sequence. Inhale, arch the back, look up at the ceiling. As you exhale, tuck the chin, pelvis, and round through the back for cat. Inhale, up. Cow. Exhale, cat. We'll just do a couple more. I always tell my students, feel free to close your eyes when you're doing these and find your own rhythm. You may even find that one feels really good in your body, and you might want to hold there and explore that with a breath or two. The old sages used to say that we are only as young as our spine is flexible. So I took you through all 6 movements of the spine already, and you didn't even know. We'll come back to that center. From here, go ahead and walk those feet together. So bring your knees and your feet together if you're able to. We're going to go in for another twist here. I just want to check my time so I don't go over. All right, inhale, reach the arms up. This time as you exhale, you're going to open up the arms out to the sides, twist to the left. So it's like kind of like airplane arms. Inhale, the arms come back to center. And then exhale to the other side. And then inhale, come back to center. This time bring your hands together back to the heart. Let the thumbs touch at the chest. Inhale, lift the heart. Good, exhale. We're going to take that right elbow, try to see if you can bring it down just to maybe between your knees. Maybe it just touches that right knee. Maybe it goes between. Maybe you can reach it all the way to the other side. Good. Now take that top elbow, reach it up to the ceiling. Inhale, try to lengthen through the spine. And exhale, press into that elbow on the knee and find that deeper twist. Anybody feel like they gotta go to the bathroom now?
Like 3 places.
You cracked already? Oh, awesome. Inhale, come back to center, thumbs to the heart, lengthen out through the spine. Here we go to the other side. Exhale. Now remember, one side may be more or less flexible than the other. That's usually how our bodies work. And then inhale, come back to center. Stretch the arms tall, reach the arms up, hands are touching. Good, this time as you exhale, bend at your elbows and try to bring that thumb or the thumbs behind the head. Good, now see a lot of us are chicken winging out. Try to bring those elbows in. Reach the elbows to the ceiling and you'll feel that deep stretch in the back of the arms. If you want to turn this into a back bend, you can inhale, arch the back, looking up. Exhale, come back to center. Release the hands down. Then you can shake it out if you need to. Good. All right, we're going to walk those feet wide again. This time even wider than they were before, okay? We're going to take the right arm, bend it at 90 degrees. Take that right elbow down to the knee. Inhale, reach the left arm up. Can you feel that deep stretch in that left side? And inhale, come back to center. You can release that top arm. Now we're going to chicken wing 90-degree elbow with the other. Bring that elbow down to the knee. When you are ready, inhale, reach that other arm up. Stay with your breath. Our breath always stays steady in our yoga practice, and our body moves with the breath. Exhale, release it. Coming back up, release that hand down. You can also roll out the shoulders if you need to. How's everybody feeling? Good? All right, we're going to do belly breathing now. So breathing is an essential part, the most important part of our yoga practice. In yoga, we call it pranayama, just means the breath of life. So we're going to do what's called belly breath. So we'll do the belly breath, and then we'll do the 3-part breath, and then we'll be done. And then you guys will get to enjoy a lovely sound bath, okay? All right, from here, sit up nice and tall. Take a deep breath in, press the crown of your head to the ceiling like you're sitting nice and tall. Somebody's got that string pulling you nice and tall. Exhale, roll the shoulders back and down. Good, place both hands on your belly. Good. Close your eyes if you're comfortable with it. And I want you to take a deep breath in and just notice what happens to your belly. Now you should notice the belly expands. Oftentimes we breathe opposite, so that this is you. I'm not going to call you out, you already know. So we'll take another deep breath here. Make your belly big like Buddha. Inhale. Exhale, pull the belly in. Good, now you can open the eyes. We're going to move the hands. You're going to make like the letter C with your hands and bring them to the side of your rib cage. All right, wrap them on both sides. Good, now we're going to do that 3-part breath. So you already did the belly, so you know how to engage that, okay? We're going to inhale, belly gets big. Try to see if you can move the breath to the ribs and you'll feel the rib cage expand and the chest lift. As you exhale, the chest relaxes, the rib cage relaxes, the belly relaxes. We've got 2 more like that. Inhale, belly big, ribs, chest. Exhale, chest, ribs, belly. One more time. Inhale, belly, ribs, chest. Exhale, chest, ribs, and belly. Good. You can relax your hands. Normally we do another twist, but I've already given you guys lots of those already in just this short practice, so we'll just close out our practice with a single Om. So many of you may not be comfortable with that. This may be your first taste with yoga at all. So I think this is a great entrance and complement to our sound bath. Om was thought to be the first sound of creation, and there are already hospitals that are using sound healing for just that, for healing. So they're finding that frequency and vibrational healing are helping people. So imagine that mixed with cannabis. Anyway. So we're gonna do the Om, and we're just gonna do one. I don't want you to worry about how you sound. None of us are professional singers, at least not that I know of. So don't worry about what you sound like. It's really about creating the vibration. However, if you don't feel comfortable doing it, you don't have to. You will still benefit from the vibration that everyone else is creating, okay? So don't feel like you have to. So you can either place one hand on your heart and the other one on top of it, or you can come back into that prayer pose, whichever one resonates with you more. If you'd like to close the eyes, you can. We're first going to do a big cleansing breath to start, and I'll guide you through it. So we're not oming just yet. Take a deep breath in through the nose. Open the mouth and sigh out. Close the mouth, take a deep breath in. Here we go. Just sit with that for a moment. Let that vibration run through your body. And you can stay here just for the next moment or two while we transition. So as we transition here, again, you can stay where you are. You can release everything and open the eyes. You can even maybe lay back in your seat. This is also known as a form of meditation. So make yourself comfortable. Scoot your bottom towards the edge of the seat and just lean back. You can let those hands rest in the lap with the palms open as a gesture of receiving this beautiful gift. I'm going to let our friend introduce herself.
I'm Selina. I'm a BraggIn Wellness, and I'll give you a little more after. I want to keep you in this flow state, so just sit back and relax and let me take you on a sound journey. right, so I'm Selina. I'm of BraggIn Design, and I practice all kinds of holistic healing. Cannabis has definitely helped me on my journey, and I'm grateful to be here. I hope that any of you who have never experienced a sound journey actually got to enjoy the vibrations. Sound works because, as you all know, we're 70% made of water, and sound travels through water the best. So thank you for being a vessel for this experience and letting me play for you. Normally, I look around the crowd, and that's kind of how I gear what I'm playing. I play intuitively, so as I'm looking around and I see that people are kind of fidgeting, or I was definitely playing to the ones to get their shoulders to sink and their eyes to close. So again, thank you for having me. I really appreciated it.
Thank you so much. So we'd like to transition to, if there are any questions from the session, if there's anything anybody would like to. Now that you're relaxed, right?
Tamara, where can we get your book?
Yes, so my second book is available on Amazon, but like I said, I'm having a book signing at 2 o'clock. So you're welcome to join me in the expo hall. But even if, come by and see it, you might be inspired. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks everyone. We are going to go ahead and get our 2 o'clock panel set. And hang on online and hang on in person. Look at everyone up there.
Kill the screen?
Oh, it stands? Hey. Chris, can you please turn that off?
Welcome back, everyone online, and thank you for folks who are here in the room. Welcome to your 2 p.m. panel, Building a Winning Cannabis Team, Strategy from Start to Scale. So this afternoon, we're going to be talking about mostly the application phase and the pre-operational post-license award phase of business process of entering the cannabis marketplace, because that's really what we're facing in the next probably 12 to 18 months here in Virginia. So let me introduce our panelists here. I have Colton Ferris with the Hill Group, Ashwin with CEO of LeafLink, and the third panelist is on his way, Paul McLean with the Virginia Minority Cannabis Coalition. So let me just start and give you guys each an opportunity to introduce your businesses while we wait for Paul to join us, and then we'll dive into the panel questions, okay? Colton, why don't you tell us about the Hill Group?
Yeah, my name is Colton Ferris, and I work for a company called the Hill Group, where we sell P&C insurance, health insurance, things like that. But I'm the director of our cannabis division, where we pretty much work with growers, processors, testing facilities, transporters, you name it, doing everything from property insurance to employment and practice liability, full stop shop. So do a little bit of everything.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashwin Raj. I'm the CEO of LeafLink. LeafLink is a technology platform, marketplace, and banking services company. We've been around for 10 years. Before I jump into about how we can help, I want to first of all say this is such an exciting moment for us that Virginia is going down this path, and we've been there from when Colorado first started to now to see Virginia, take this step. It's extremely exciting, and there's a lot of learnings that have happened over the last, since the first state legalized, and we have seen how states have evolved, and the goal is to offer that learning and experience. We primarily connect operators on the manufacturing supply side, wholesalers, distributors to the retailers. So we are more on the B2B side, and it's a technology platform. So you can find any of their products that you can then use for your retail locations. And we support that through order management, inventory management, banking and financial services, compliance. And so that's what we're here to do. We're here to help everyone set up their businesses in the right way and support them as they both get set up and then become operational.
And Paul, we're just doing intros. I introduced you as Paul McLean with the Virginia Minority Cannabis Coalition. So if you'd like to share with us a little bit of the work you do in the cannabis space.
Awesome. Okay, awesome. That's on. I apologize. I was outside talking to the yoga woman. that was my first exposure to yoga, and I'll be doing yoga in 2026. Paul McLean, founder of VMCC, the Virginia Minority Cannabis Coalition. We have been focused since day one in a few specific areas. Primary was preparing people for entrepreneurship in the cannabis space in all different levels, all different places in the industry. And then beyond that, we've done a ton of advocacy work, but we have tried to be an education component in the state when people weren't trying to educate people. We do new consumer classes. We teach senior citizens how to roll joints. We teach people how to not just learn about the cannabis industry, but I'm real big on people learning how to become a solid business owner or entrepreneur, because I don't believe they're the same thing. So I do a lot of teaching, and we do a lot of teaching people about the aspects of business, getting investors, getting your foot in the door, representing your business, and all those things to bridge the gap in this cannabis space. I've taught and worked with cannabis groups and students, and had students in California and in the Colorado marketplace. I've worked with the state of Colorado and their education program. So I'm about helping people become better business people, because a lot of people don't understand that be a business owner is hard as hell. And to be a business owner in cannabis is hard as shit, because it's very, very competitive because of everything you have to do. Just from learning and working with over 50 students here locally, Bad business will destroy your household. So we'll talk more about that.
Well, thanks, Paul. I think that's a perfect segue to my first question, which is just right now, when we look at the Virginia policy landscape, we've got a few different bills out there, but we know one of the first key things that's still being finalized is what date applications open and when they'll be awarded. So we're going to call this phase the application phase, which is when you're preparing your materials, you're turning them into the regulator, and you're still waiting to learn whether or not you're going to be issued a license. So thinking about this kind of application phase where you're really getting organized, getting ready, it's also where you first start building your team and start bringing in the experts and the people who are going to help you succeed as a business, first by trying to win this license. So let me just start by saying for each of you in the different way that your business and you're in the cannabis space, what are the things that are most important for business owners to be thinking about when they're building their application teams and they're getting those applications ready? Colton, you want to take it away?
Yeah. So in the application phase, I would say the biggest thing I see is a lot of these states, they'll have a requirement in there that you're required to have insurance policies on the front end. Well, legally, we can't insure a business that is not operational. So a lot of times that really doesn't make sense, but yet they still have someone that's asking or demanding that you provide proof of insurance. So what we usually do is meet with people and make sure they're legit, and then have conversations with them about insurance. And then I usually draft what I call a letter of intent, just saying, my name is Colton Ferris. I write with these insurance carriers. My clients, ABC Cannabis, and once they're licensed, we will have them insured to the fullest extent. And 9 out of 10 times that takes care of it. Outside of that, then, I think working with someone like myself or someone else that, specializes in this niche is important, because I can at least provide like estimates on what your final insurance will cost before you go and jump through all these hoops and you create your P&L and, think that you're going to pay, $5 a year in insurance, and they're 100 times that or something, so it's important to get those estimates up front.
I'll also just add that having somebody in the insurance space who's experienced with insuring cannabis facilities can also be hugely helpful in your real estate search, because when you know what somebody like Colton is going to ask for you to have on site, and if you've got somebody like Colton who can tell you what's going to matter for your insurance premiums, you can make smarter decisions about what types of construction costs and what types of facilities you choose, because knowing that might mean a little bit more today is going to pay off in some other way later. So just highly recommend proactively thinking about and consulting and building that part of your team. Ashwin, take it away.
Yeah, building on that, Angie, the way to think about it, first to start with, what are you trying to be, right? Are you a grower, manufacturer, distributor, retailer? And that's going to influence. And some of you and some of the others may do a lot of it, and that goes into that process, and that dictates a lot of subsequent steps that you'll have to take, including the application process. So you have to be able to determine that, and then the second piece around it, as you think about even the application process, is that there's going to be checks on who's the owner of the business, what type of ownership is there. We've seen this happen where in other states that have started off, there are multiple investors who come in. And for somebody starting off, you need the funds, because you're going to start off and you're going to build a business. But remember that there are checks going to be happening on all those owners and who has control and the controlling ownership. So all that you have to think through prior to even the application process, so that you disclose that information. And remember, for these owners, there's going to be background checks that are happening. And so you have to have those materials ready. And depending on how stringent the state decides to have in the application process, they may require your source of funds and other things. So you'll have to start thinking about even what is the financial banking relationship that I'm going to have. And again, here, it's better to, in Jesus' point, similar to the insurance, it's better to have a bank which is familiar with cannabis banking, because requirements of cannabis banking are significantly different than a standard business. So you'll have to think through that aspect as well. And so ultimately, from an application point of view, these are, as a business owner, things to think about. But the most important thing in my mind is also the product. You know, what type of product are you going to grow? What type of plant, if you're going to grow it? What type of product are you going to manufacture? If you're a distributor, are you going to carry multiple brands, single brand? All of those are going to be important, and those are also things that you'll have to disclose. So it's I don't want to, say that it is very complex, but you have to take care to think through all of these elements prior to starting the application. Don't go into the application and then say, okay, this is the first time I'm thinking about it. No, that's not where you want to be.
I think that's an excellent point. I think this is true in all parts of the economy. Anybody can start a business. Not everybody ends up having a successful business, right? And that can be because of choices or just pure bad luck. And that's just the nature, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs understand that. So, Paul, I just want to hand it over to you for this application, last comments on this application phase before we move on to the much more exciting phase of what do you do when you have the license, when it's not open yet. What's some of the advice you give to your boot campers about building their team when they're drafting applications?
There's a few things I want to build off what these two gentlemen said. First, with what you were saying, Colton, he mentioned the term P&L. If you don't know what that is, that's the first problem. My first bit of advice is recruit yourself. A lot of people think they're a business owner and they got business dreams, but I'm telling you, I'm the child of two, the grandchild of 3 business owners. It is hard. So you got to recruit yourself. Why am I saying that? If you don't recruit yourself, you can't choose what part of the industry you want to be in. I have people come to me and say, yeah, I think I might want to be a retailer or maybe a cultivator. Okay, so what are you looking into? Well, I haven't started looking into it yet. You're way behind, way behind. If you don't know what a P&L is, you need to go study business, just regardless of what kind. You need to go learn business fundamentals. And I recommend that to people that have been in business a long time who are a business owner, because the entrepreneurial spirit has been beat out of them. They make good income, they're comfortable. Comfortable is dangerous at the beginning stages of the cannabis industry, because you gotta have the energy to get up and do what you don't wanna do, which is go to legislative meetings and do all those things. Second thing, an accountant. Not just an accountant, you need a CPA. I'm tired of people talking about my brother's an accountant, my brother, my nephew, my cousin. Great, you need a CPA. You need somebody that has the certification and skills to cover your ass if you have to go in front of the IRS. Real talk. And once you find a CPA, then you want to start talking to them about 280E, sorry. Because they can start leveling up their knowledge about that. The IRS provides classes to CPAs specifically for that, but only they can go get those classes, because they know this industry's coming. Next thing you need to do, if you haven't at this point got you an attorney, you need to find somebody with cannabis experience. The first cannabis attorney we used to form VMCC I was very blessed to have known this young lady right here. And she introduced us to the leading cannabis attorney at the time. I did not realize how fortunate we were to get a $1,000 an hour attorney to break and set your stuff up. I learned a lot through that experience. And you guys, an attorney, even if they're not a cannabis specific attorney, find you someone local that you can talk to that has contract negotiation experience. Somebody that has done mergers, takeovers, long-term capital financing, bridge funding. You need somebody that has done this kind of stuff that happens at the low level of local business, even if you can't get to the big time attorney, because that person is able to give you advice when it comes time for you to negotiate with your investor. That person has the expertise to help you protect yourself in year 5, 6, and 7 if you're blessed to still be in business at that time. And the last thing because there's a lot of people you can add to your, but these are what I talk to my students about. Find you someone you're comfortable with. And the last is you're gonna need somebody in PR and marketing. Why am I saying all of this? Too many people come into the cannabis industry thinking they are going to touch what they do. If you think you're gonna be a retailer or you're gonna be at the counter talking to customers every day, either you're in a struggling business or that's the first week of business. Because you need to be thinking in terms of having the right people with the right character, the right personality traits to be part of your team. Because that team is going to make or break you. And in the cannabis space, if this breaks you, it breaks your household. I got friends that have lost everything to cannabis. And I got friends that have got everything through cannabis. They're in the same marketplace. How is that? Because you have to be good at business. I cannot stress that enough. So get you people on your mastermind team in the beginning that you know, like, and trust. If you don't like your attorney, you're not going to have honest conversations with that person. If you feel like you can't be honest with your CPA, you're not going to have good business conversations. My CPA is 80 years old. And people, why do you got that old accountant? Because he's been the accountant for 5 Fortune 100 companies and taken all of them in front of the IRS. I know that dude knows business. I can throw an idea at him, and you want to be able to do this. Throw an idea at your attorney or your accountant, and I'm going to shut up. They are able to give you feedback off of the concept. If you got to explain everything to your attorney or to your accountant, that ain't the person you should be using.
Amen. And again, I think at one point in the cannabis space, especially in the early days, we were hearing about how basically all you had to do was get the dispensary paperwork and you could become a millionaire. And then it became like, right, so as we've gone through different phases of legalization, first it was like, I just gotta get the paperwork, then I can make it. Then it was like, okay, I don't just need to win a license, I gotta find the investors, then I know I can make it, right? And as this industry has become more and more normalized and more expansive, it's become more and more important to focus on the strength of your business model. Because at this point in time, the cannabis industry, it does not matter what size your business is. There are large operators that are collapsing. Some of the largest in the country are collapsing or selling off their assets. And then there are also small businesses, from more recent waves that are starting to become medium-sized businesses. And this ebb and flow is truly there. And I think it's important to note how dynamic this space is and that failure is happening across all parts of the market as well as success. So with that in mind, let's go back to you've submitted your application, you've become one of the lucky license awardees, and now you're trying to get those doors open and get open for business. What are some of the important mistakes to avoid in this post-award, pre-operational phase? And this time I'll start with Ashwin.
What are the mistakes to avoid? I think Paul hit on a lot of things, right? I'll start on the product side because we help both the operators, brands, and the retailers connect to the products. I think the most important thing is if you take the retail side, as you set up your store, it depends on where the policy lands, but there will be requirements around how you display your product, how people can access the product. And to Paul's point, you may need to set up your store in a way where you just have representations of your product, but your actual product is behind somewhere else in the store. And you'll need that marketing person or the salesperson in the front to be able to sell and communicate and sell that product, right? The bigger mistake there is, I've seen this, and there are a lot of experienced people here in the audience, is everybody thinks that they can sell every product. Probably, but different products have different sales cycles and different buying cycles. So your vape versus your gummy versus your pre-roll all sell at different rates. So you actually need to know what your consumer wants and is going to buy and at what rate. And that is going to influence what you're going to buy from the supplier. And that's where a lot of retailers also make a mistake, where a lot of suppliers initially, in the early days, tend to overproduce. And what do they do when they overproduce with their excess inventory? They're going to offer it to you saying, hey, I can give it to you at a discount. And so you'll be like, oh, I'm getting a good deal. Let me buy this and stock it up. What happens? You don't sell that in time. And now you're stuck with inventory that you're not able to get rid of. But remember, the supplier is going to ask you for money, net 30 days. You have to pay them. So now you're running into a working capital management issue. And if you don't have a good handle on that, suddenly you're stuck as a business where you have inventory, you're not able to sell it, and you owe money. That's why what Paul said, you need that business ability to manage all of that. So these are common mistakes that you make. So the suggestions and advice that we give is, think through what product it is, both on the growing manufacturing side as well as on the retail side. Understand what you need to produce, how much you need to produce, so that you're not on the supply side not stuck with excess inventory, and the same on the retail side. And I mentioned this to Injis when he first spoke. Make your life easy. Do the easy things. Rely on experts. Rely on the insurance expert. Rely on business expert. There are, over the years, a lot of technology and platforms that have come through. Banking, as I mentioned, has come through. Use them to make your lives easier. Ultimately, all these things that we mentioned, all this administrative stuff, is immaterial if you don't sell the product. Doesn't matter. Your business is selling that product. You need to know what you can sell, how you can sell it, how quickly you can sell it, when to buy it. And that you have to focus on. And you need to get a sense of that. There's going to be a lot of heavy lifting as you set up operations, and you're going to be pulled in 1,000 different directions, because you're going to set up that manufacturing warehouse. You need to figure out transportation. You need to figure out delivery. You're going to be pulled in 1,000 directions. But remember, ultimately it matters as to how quickly that product is being consumed. And that is where I would ask everybody to focus and pay attention to.
Before I hand this over to Colton, I actually want to share a story Colton shared with me once, which is part of the beginning of our conversation about, oh, Colton, you need to come to this conference last month. Colton mentioned that for insurance policies, there's frequently a requirement that you move all of your inventory to a secure space in the back. And that's typically required in regulations, but isn't always. And these are, I mention this because this is where it's important to have these resources to turn to, because there are going to be things required in regulations, but some things might not be, but you still need to do it for somebody in the space, right? And so being able to understand both what's being required of you by the state, as well as what's going to be required of you from your vendors, is really helpful for understanding for planning during these phases. So Colton, let me hand it over to you around some of those important mistakes to avoid.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, in the beginning, two big mistakes either revolve around the landlord or around the gap between the state's rules and regs versus insurance rules and regs. So to go off what Niggas was just saying, so Maryland, for example, is a state where their rules and regs match insurance carriers' rules and regs pretty spot on. So, just by following the rules and regs, you're unintentionally following the insurance carrier's rules and regs. Whereas a lot of other states, for example, you can turn a broom closet into your vault or safe room. Well, that doesn't work for an insurance carrier. So a lot of times people read those rules and regs and they build it out the cheapest way possible because no one wants to spend money. And well, what they don't realize is, next thing you know, especially if you're like this is an exact example that happened to me. I have a great client that's pretty much a processor and a middleman. So they just make a lot of gummies, pre-rolls, those type things for other people. Well, they ended up having around $5 million worth of other people's inventory on hand at one time. And they call me to get it insured, and they send me pictures of what is literally a broom closet that has a flimsy door on it and visible plywood. I mean, walls that you could kick through. So obviously that does not meet, yeah, $5 million with other people's product. And so obviously that does not meet the rules and regs. See, these insurance carriers, and this isn't just one cannabis carrier, this is all of them. Everyone probably has heard of an exclusion in insurance policy. Well, a lot of people don't realize an exclusion just slightly limits coverage. However, in these policies, there's what's called warranties and safeguards. And that means these warranties and safeguards say if you don't have X, Y, and Z in place, one being your camera systems on at all times, we're not going to cover X, Y, and Z. And so one issue we have in certain states is if they leave the inventory out at night in a dispensary or even a grow and it's not picked up, that they'll limit coverage. So say you have so let's just say it's $200,000 worth of inventory you want insured in your store, but you're not picking it up at night. Well, they might have a limit of 50% on there saying, okay, well, after hours, we're only going to cover up to 50% of that. And you need to understand that so that you can limit your risk or your loss. And then outside of that, the other issue I see a lot of times when we're starting out, people get find them, especially on the retail side, find them a great location. They get with their landlord, they sign a lease, they agree, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 a month on it. They think that's great. Then what happens is the landlord, the operator, and the landlord's insurance guy really didn't know that having a cannabis tenant was going to be an issue. So what it is all these standard insurance carriers that you guys are familiar with, probably a Liberty Mutual, a Nationwide, a State Farm, all those guys have a clause in every insurance policy that excludes illegal activity or even might specifically name cannabis. That includes tenant operations as well. So what I see happen is the operator and the landlord agree on all this. The guy moves in or begins to move in, and then that landlord's insurance carrier does an inspection or finds out there's a cannabis tenant in there. Well, next thing you know, he gets dropped. So let's say he was paying $30,000 a year in insurance, and he's got a big strip center with a bunch of different tenants. Well, you move in, and now all of a sudden his insurance dropped him. Y'all agreed on $5,000 a month, and now his new insurance policy is $65,000 a year because you moved in. Well, he doesn't think it's fair that the rest of his tenants have to pick up that cost. And so now we have to go back to the drawing. You got to go back to the drawing board. You either have to renegotiate rent with them, which now is going to cost quite a lot of money each year, or you just end up not being able to use that space. And so then that can also mess with your license because were you approved because of that space, like on that space? And then now you're going to have to file paperwork to move to a different spot, negotiate with that landlord. So I usually try and get my tenants to let me talk to their landlords up front. A lot of times the landlord thinks I'm just trying to sell them, but I'm really just trying to avoid a big crap sandwich, as I like to call it, and prevent that grenade from going off down the road. But yeah, those are the two biggest that we see.
And Paul, what are some of the biggest mistakes for folks to avoid after they have a license but before they open their doors to customers?
Well, man, just building off of what these two gentlemen, we need to take this on the road. To what you were saying originally, as a new business in this space, you need to familiarize yourself with three terms: capital investor, cash flow, and credit line. You're gonna need all three of those things, regardless of how great you think you are, because you're gonna need the cash flow to keep your business afloat, because you'll have invoices that you gotta pay. When he was talking about you owe the money to the people that supply your product, those are net 30 terms. So understanding those three things and how they play into any business is the first thing. Going back to what you were saying with the insurance, one of my mentors when I first got into finance years ago, I love that guy to death. We still talk regularly. He's retired now, but he had a statement he used to say when we worked. He said, cheap is expensive. What I have found in cannabis, more than ever, being cheap is very expensive. Like this gentleman was talking about people not doing what they need to do because they say, I don't want to pay that money. That is one of the biggest things I've seen be a problem for people once their business starts getting going. You're at your license, you're trying to get it established, get into the black so you can feel confident and feel good and sleep at night. Because until you start paying off this $4 million that's on your head, you ain't gonna sleep. Just being real. You're not gonna sleep. And that goes to another conversation. You're gonna have to get your health right, because you're gonna need the energy to work 20 hours a day and still be a good dad, good mom, and do all of that other stuff, okay? But when it comes to this stage, the reason I say cheap is expensive is because I've seen people make business decisions because they didn't have the mastermind that I originally talked about in place. Not having an insurance person that has credible knowledge and not having an attorney creates a big issue in this window of time. What I've seen happen, just a couple scenarios. Had a friend that opened up a grow, okay? And they had 5 grow rooms and a mother room. And they had approximately $2 million in product in each grow room. No telling how much the mother room was worth, because as you all know, that's where the money is harvested long term, having consistency in the mother room. Well, they went cheap on the HVAC control, they went cheap on the monitoring system, and in the middle of the night, a pipe busts, water floods, knocks out the electricity. They got no 24-hour monitoring because they were going to do that in year 2 after they made money and they expanded. So in that window of time overnight, about $10 million in product was destroyed. Meaning it still looks great. It's green. If you took it through the process, you could still probably get high off of it if you wanted. However, you legally can't sell it now because the humidity changed and now you got infestation. And you have to destroy $10 million in product. No, you can't sell it on the other side of the country. No, you can't use it. You have to destroy. That right there is the downside to cannabis. In the illegal market, you can still sell that crap. Here, you have to be so good at what you're doing that you don't experience that. So in the beginning, you have to plan. So when you get to this phase, when this stuff happens, you know who to talk to on your team. You're not the person covering all the hats in the business. You need whoever's the head of your grow, they need to be close to the grow. You can't be 4 hours from the grow facility. So in this window of time, thinking in terms of everything being perfect is where I see so many people make mistakes, because you have to prepare, especially in a new market like this. You have to prepare and do the what ifs with your team. And that's why you need good team people to give you those real what ifs, because Virginia's a new market that's developing. We don't have tons and tons of electrical people with tons and tons of experience in replacing lights overnight and plumbing issues and HVAC issues. So you need to start cultivating those relationships. If you got some friends in HVAC, I would encourage them to go get certified, because you don't have to wait.
Thank you guys for that. And so are we able to take audience questions, Jan?
Yes, but I would like to take a microphone from one of you.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, that
Well,
person.
folks decide to chime in. I'm just gonna ask, we'll start with Paul and come this way this time. What's 1 or 2 things you've seen that differentiates the successful businesses? And if you'd like to call out a business that you guys have seen succeed, or draw attention to any brands or folks out in the space that you really admire because of the way they move, please feel free to share it so folks here can go find some of the great examples in this space.
Yes, I have a few. First thing I'll say as a bit of advice, you have to be creative in cannabis. You have to think creatively as a business owner, because you're breaking into a market. You gotta understand what's so different here. This is the first industry that's new, where the actual consumer knows everything about the product before the legislators that are actually creating the new industry. You understand what I'm saying? That right there is what creates so many problems in this space, because the people making the laws don't know what the consumer wants. A lot of people don't understand how bougie, snobby, finicky, particular cannabis consumers are. If you've consumed cannabis long enough, you know what dirt is, and you know what prime quality sticky icky is. And there's 2 different experiences there. You have to be able to convey that and your knowledge and all of that through your business. And depending on where you want to be, it can be easier, it can be hard. But either way, it comes back to being good at business. So Guys, it's an ongoing, never-ending growth process. This is going to be something where you start, and because of when we're starting in this economy, this cycle, presidential cycle, election cycle, economic cycle, cannabis could be completely different in 4 years. If you're not creative enough to see and move with it, that can be devastating to any business. So I say think creatively, stay creative. If seeing stuff black and white is how you are and how you have to function, you need to get creative people on your team. Everybody can't be seeing stuff the same way. You need the right people around you so that when it comes to making decisions, you can really trust the people you got behind you.
I think that's great advice, Paul. Before Ashwin takes it, I'll just add to what Paul said and say the most successful entrepreneurs I've seen in the cannabis space are ready to just always keep trying. I worked with a social equity applicant in 2021 in Illinois. We didn't get lucky, right? Like, we worked hard, we waited. He didn't end up winning a license, but he didn't let it set him back. He was just like, all right, on to the next thing. And he pursued opportunities in Colorado, and now he's won a license in Minnesota. And he's consulting with multiple brands, right? So he still found a way to make a career out of it, and he still stayed on it to pursue it in different ways. And so I just want to echo, not just creative, but resilient. Just because your first effort might not have panned out the way you wanted it to, just keep trying, because there is still lots of opportunity here. Ashwin, what's your differentiation for successful businesses?
Yeah, I think Paul mentioned the first one. Absolutely the team. You have to have a good team around you. And we've seen this, and you know, in other markets where I've heard retail owners tell me, I can't exist without this inventory manager, right? Because they know, and this was a direct example. I was there in the facility, we were talking to them, and you can hear this shriek of agony, and this person finds out that all the cases have been mislabeled. Imagine, there is a track and trace requirement. You cannot sell the product until you track it correctly. And so you have to relabel it, you have to figure out, you have to track it back to where it came from, what it is, and then, so you have to have a team that you can trust and whom you can rely on. And this is not just inventory, it's quality. You were talking about quality control, marketing, etc. So I think that's number one. Number two is, this should be your own personal behavior and your team. Prepare. Always keep preparing. Keep being prepared is what is going to help you, not only to get started, but also to sustain the business. What the Virginia market is going to be later this year when it starts is not what it is going to be in 2 years, and it's not what it's going to be in 4 or 5 years. It will change. I can put this down in writing and we can all come back and you can tell me whether I was right or wrong, but I'm 100% sure I'll be right. It will change. Other regulations will get added, licenses will get issued, and new entrants will come in, existing entrants will leave. I'm from California, and the California market, while we're early movers, is very, very different from what it was today. And prices have just, gone almost to rock bottom. Imagine, you have to be prepared for that situation. You're going to have to compete, and there are going to be big players coming in. So preparation, and in extension of preparation, is discipline. Be focused on what you're good at and become very good at that. And then you cannot be displaced, because you do it well. By preparation, discipline, and repetition, you're going to get very good, and you have this trusted team who will execute for you. Injist, you mentioned call out somebody. I'm going to call out our friends at Jushi, who have been our partners in other locations as well. They are a tremendous brand. They're introducing new brands. That is a company that you can look to understand how do you start, how do you expand, how do you grow. And they've got awesome practices and follow all these things that I mentioned. So they're here in the audience, and if you all get a chance, go talk to them. And they have a booth there where you can see their products as well.
Colton?
Yeah, so obviously being resilient and just good business practice is really obviously what sets these operators apart. So these guys have really covered most of that. So I want to take a moment just to kind of explain that and give some examples based on my clients. I work in a lot of different states, and so I'll start, Grow West is one that we have that I work with out of Cumberland, Maryland, that they are known as having the gold standard operating procedures by the state. They're a family-run business that has really grown and just it has quite the footprint in Maryland. It's done an exceptional job. They are dedicated to safety and loss control, which we provide a lot of those services for them. They have over 200,000 square feet, so something can go wrong every day in a facility of that size, and they're never shut down no matter what happens. And so they do a great job with that and being committed to safety and compliance. And then they have a good brand too. But then we also work with Matt with AltSoul out of DC, where they just really become the biggest grower in the market, and they're so sought after. I don't know if you guys are on Reddit, but that's where all the cannabis drama is. And so, you get on there, and you got to have a thick skin as a grower, because I don't care if it's good weed or bad weed. They're the most.
You want peace of mind, you'll avoid it.
Yeah, they're just. I hate to say it, but cannabis consumers are just so pretentious these days, and it's never good enough. So
pretentious and ruthless.
Yeah. So, but AltSoul, for whatever reason, is always the one I see they talk the highest of, and those are guys that we're in a market that DC is just been a rough market to operate in. And I met with Matt and them not too long ago, and he was just telling me their whole story and how it took almost 10 years, and now they're finally to a point where they're making some money, and it's actually turned the corner. And so they had so many setbacks, and they just kept going and kept going, and then another operator, Green Analytics, is a testing facility I work with. Well, he's in 9 different states with 9 different auto policies. I don't know if you guys understand how big a deal just auto insurance is and how much crap you have to deal with that, but every other week we have an issue. Right now we're overcoming some issues in New York, because New York is just the roughest state to deal in.
I thought you were going to say something else, or some other word.
No, I'm not going to say anything about New York. I love New York, but the laws and rules and regs don't really help you. Don't help with some of that. But and then in smaller states, for instance, I have an operator. We have a lot of operators. For instance, I had a big foothold in Mississippi. It's a medical state, and a lot of people raised all this money and thought they had it figured out, and they hire all these fancy consultants. Well, one of my best operators in Mississippi is a guy from Mendenhall, Mississippi, which is population 2,000. Him and a buddy opened one dispensary by maxing out their credit cards, by just being reasonable with money and business smart. They opened a dispensary for $100,000, $200,000, get good leases, rinse and repeat. The guy's got 25 now. Whereas some of these big operators that raise 20, 30, 40 million dollars, have fancy consultants, have the state representatives involved in it, they're bankrupt. So it's just good business sense always wins. So there's always different avenues to make money in this industry too. Another great one I work with is Mid-South Extracts out of Mississippi, which is a processor that he's just become the middleman for these grows, and he just does really good business with edibles and pre-rolls and tinctures and things like that. And he's so good. He's just the mad scientist, I call him. But they're starting to work in Kentucky and in Missouri and Alabama, and they're hiring him as a consultant in addition to consulting and owning part of these other businesses. So it's you do good work, the cream of the crop always rises to the top, and you will be sought after, and you will have a brand, and you will do well in this industry.
I'd like to open it up to audience questions now. So do we have any questions from anyone in the audience now?
Yeah, I got one for you guys.
Thanks,
Hello. Yeah, hit the right button. And I'll use California's cannabis market. That entered into the market, and the compounded annual growth rate was going to be in the billions and billions and billions. And usually when you have these high compounded annual growth rate industries, it absorbs a lot of business model mistakes. Listening to you guys speak, it feels like that's gone away. So I'm curious, based on your experience, this feels like a commodity market now, where you're either consolidating or you're dying. And then the question I have for you guys is that outlook kind of we're starting to plateau on our growth for cannabis? Is the legislative issues forcing consumers to continue to purchase in other markets than legalized markets, further driving this to be more complicated for our cannabis operators? I'm very curious where is the stem of the struggles that historically high growth market, like I can do a bunch of dumb things and still survive. This sounds like if I do those, I'm dead quick.
Go ahead, Bob.
Man, you just asked the biggest loaded question I have ever heard. It's like, we could talk for a week on that question right there.
Textbooks will be written to answer that question.
A couple things. One, yes, it is being viewed as a commodity because it really is, but because because originally it wasn't treated like a commodity, it was just treated like, oh, it's the new thing to get rich. Overproduction has happened, and overproduction in every marketplace is what is really the catalyst to create all these problems, because it just sends the market turning and spiraling down the drain because it's hard to overcome and offset the tax implications. Retail, if you're paying 46% in taxes, you know, you gotta be a doggone good business because you can't afford to lose anything. But if you're in a state with jacked up situations, it just makes it harder and harder. So from what I have seen with my friends in other states and people that I work with, the overproduction just triggers so many things, and it does lift up the illegal market. It confuses the real legitimate consumer. The legitimate consumer walks into places they think are legitimate cannabis licensed businesses, and they're not. Like he was talking about with insurance. When my friends they were some of the original people in the medical cannabis market in Cali. Well, there were people that had a duplicate fake business. They used the insurance licensing to get rid of the fake businesses because there were so many that looked correct. So in the beginning, as a business owner, you got to do what's right for your business, but understand you have to be looking at the landscape to figure out what is your path, because you got to navigate through all this crap.
I'll just add, I think, one, to answer your question, you definitely have to look state by state, because every state has had different licensing models at different points in time. Second, we really have to acknowledge that around the time of the pandemic or so, we had a massive implosion in the supply side out west. I think at one point, Oklahoma had 9 million missing pounds of cannabis in their medical program. And it was so bad that it was like, I was hearing it from legacy operators in New York about how this crappy Oklahoma weed was depressing the prices in the illegal market in New York. At the same time that the legal market was struggling to open because there were so many pop-up stores coming in while licensing was slow. So I think that we have to and to thoroughly answer your question, you have to account for the illicit sales and the way that plays into the marketplace. And then you have to account for supply side challenges. And this is where I'm going to take a little bit of time to be on my little soapbox and say, one of the biggest things I think that's important in the early years is balancing opportunity with a functional economy. So there's long been a debate about limited licenses and unlimited licenses. I think where we're starting to see states settle into is reasonable licenses issued in batches. And why? You only can issue as many licenses as, first and foremost, you can actually regulate. Because if you're not inspecting, and if you're not sale tracking and you're not collecting taxes, then why do we regulate this space in the first place? Two, you have to make sure that you're not setting all these new small farmers up for failure. Because the biggest thing that will destroy your market is oversupply. You can survive undersupply. It's gonna suck for everyone, but the market and the consumers will be able to survive that. If you have oversupply, now you're crashing out the bottom of the price. Consumers will absolutely love that. They're the number one benefactors from that at first. But then what starts to happen is your supply side can't keep up because they can't pay their bills. Their product starts to get crappier as they're less able to run a successful business. And now the consumer is not paying bottom dollar for top product, you're paying bottom dollar for bottom product. And on top of that, all these small local businesses we were also excited to see open are struggling and failing. And instead of lifting people up, we're just creating a whole new problem. And that's where I think finding that right balance where you are definitely, like, there's plenty of room for many, many more licenses in every state. But we also have to do it in a way that we're setting everybody, consumers, patients, businesses, up for success in the long term and the immediate term. And that means we're not always gonna get things right? You might have a few months where you're at an undersupply. You might have a few months where you're at a little bit of an oversupply, but you're just trying to do the best you can to keep things in an acceptable margin of error and not let your marketplace go completely off the rails. And so, sorry, thank you guys for letting me have my moment.
No, it's all good.
No, I think you answered it. I mean, I think the general answer there is every state's different. It's a different market, and not every state's as healthy as another. So it all just depends. And so that sheet killed.
But also the number of licenses is something you absolutely need to pay attention to, because that's what the investors are going to be paying attention to. Another thing that folks need to pay attention to is the timeline on license transfers. In Maryland, they've got a 5-year moratorium on transfers. And there's a lot of different conversation going on around that. And I'm not going to have an official position for anybody today, but I'll tell you kind of the range of options on something like that. If you have a long-term moratorium, that means you can't ever sell your license, right? So this means that you can't sell your license. And for many people, that is one of the paths to generational wealth, is you build your strong business and then you sell it to somebody and you get to cash out, and maybe you have a relationship still, like maybe you're still the CEO or the regional manager. That's a model that we've seen happen in Virginia's medical program. But if you're going to be able to sell, you have to know how to sell, and your investors want to know how are they going to be able to benefit from this financial transaction at some point. And it might be the loans you're repaying, it might be equity, all of those things. That's why you've got to have that team in place so you can make the decisions that are right and beneficial for you. Jesse, did you have your hand up?
Quick question about Virginia specifically. There's a great deal of concern about, quote unquote, the illegal market, both the legacy market as well as the vape, smoke, tobacco dealers out there, shops out there, who are selling, quote unquote, we would just say not good products. How has this been dealt with in other states that can be a model for how Virginia deals with it? Because it's already an issue, a great issue as far as the medicals are concerned. And going towards adult use, certainly we would want to clean all of that up in some way before we have an adult use market. So how have other states effectively dealt with that in a way that works?
This is up your alley.
Okay, sorry to steal this away from my panelists. This is a topic I have a lot of passion for. I've been vice chair of the Public Health Advisory Council here in Virginia for the last 4.5 years, and we're talking all the time about these unsafe products that have been proliferating all over the state, and it's vapes of all sorts. I think the number one, I think the state that has done the best is Maryland, and it's Maryland in the past in 2025. They tried a different tactic when they first legalized in 2023, but it required them to prove, like they had to run the products through testing, and it was taking a very, very long time to actually get the products off the shelves, right? Which is the number one goal at this point, is to get the unsafe, untested, untaxed products that are getting into the hands of kids off the shelves. And then you can adjudicate the rest of it and address the business practices and things like that. So I think what Maryland has gotten right is now enforcement is not based on what's inside the package, it's based off of what you've claimed is inside the package. And it's based off of, are you complying with Maryland's labeling and packaging rules? And that makes it much, much easier, because then you can walk in and you can say, well, this is the package, it doesn't follow the law, so now we have to take all of these mislabeled products off of your shelves. It doesn't matter whether your product is accurately labeled, whether it actually has the cannabis you said it has in it. It matters that you are lying to consumers about being a legal source of cannabis. It matters that you are not complying with the state's rules and regulations on ID laws, on tax revenue, on all of those things. And it's also important because it undermines all of the new businesses that we want to see succeeding in this transition. So I think the best moves are really aggressive fines, because we saw in DC and California that if the fines are too affordable, it just gets written into the business model. Just pay the fine, restock, wait till they come again. The bill that's up in front, SB 543, and we'll talk about this more tomorrow, it does a great job. It has really steep fines. Good businesses can come back and renegotiate those fines. But if there are repeat offenders, you could lose your alcohol license, your tobacco license, your locality could revoke your business license. Because this is not about cannabis, it's about being a fair and responsible business owner who is serving your communities and your customers appropriately, legally, and again, responsibly.
I just want to piggyback on your question there, Jesse. The whole smoke shop, vape shop thing is become, those of you that don't know, I have a serious disdain for that business because I've seen people sell illegal product to underage kids and then lie to me and say I didn't just see what I saw. I got a real problem with that. I'm down for capitalism. I love making money. But if you gotta lie, cheat, and steal to make your money, screw you, okay? When I have first started dealing with these smoke shops, when my boot campers were bringing this stuff to me, first time I learned about this, I'm not gonna say the name of the business because they're still functioning, but the owner of the business came to me with a little container of weed in it and said she was going to get a license because she was a smoke shop owner, okay? She had no idea that I knew she was completely off. Well, anyway, I'm talking to you now about mindset and just how people don't understand. Even if you've been in the legacy market, you've been in the underground market, you've been in the black market, whatever you want to call it, you have to think in terms of business and that product being considered and treated like medication. So she hands me this little vial, right? And I see it's got some nugs in it. I'm like, okay, I'm not smoking this because I don't smoke shit off the street, so didn't want to say that. However, I open up the thing out of curiosity and it's a partially smoked blunt inside of there. Now, what does that tell you about mentality? Exactly, but this person is capital backed and in that frame of mind, ready to go. Not ready for this industry, okay? With this space in cannabis in these smoke shops, these vape shops, when I started mentioning them to my friends out in Colorado and California, they didn't know what the heck I was talking about. It's within the last year, my friends in Cali started sending me pictures. Is this the Delta 8 stuff you were talking about? Because there's cannabis everywhere. In Colorado, you can buy cannabis out of a vending machine. So there was no need in marketplace. But when people dealt with supply issues and they felt, hey, I can get all this old product that's not being sold on the East Coast, and they're shipping it west. The same thing that happens with the old dirt weed from California ends up over here. They were selling the Delta 8. So a lot of states are just now starting to see this stuff. And what bothers me, I'm a hunter. My wife and I are hunters. We travel all around Maryland, the rural parts of North Carolina. I'm on back roads all the time. I go into a gas station and there's a colossal wall about 8 feet high of Delta 8 products being sold in an Amoco. And I took pictures of that and I was sending it and I was like, is this real? They had counterfeit Mike Tyson, the gummy ears. They had counterfeited all of those products and they were all had fake advertising. A consumer that doesn't have the knowledge that people in this industry have, walk into that place, consume that, and they're consuming a product that's got all kinds of stuff in it that should never be in your body. That's why all of you that are considering getting into this industry should be pissed every time you see one of those shops open up. Unfortunately, they seem to be around my neighborhood a whole lot, but now they're popping up everywhere. My kids are at Tech, they're right by the school. These products are not consumable, but the thing that bothers me is the people that are willing to sell it to your kid for them to get rich.
I think that, I think that's an important point, and let me begin by saying, this is, as I mentioned, this is Virginia's first step. Each and every one of you who's going to participate in this has a responsibility to create the best outcome for the market. And you all have to align in that together. Because if you think about it as an individual entity, only about yourself, you're going to create some of these failure points that are going to occur. Somebody is manufacturing that counterfeit Delta 8 and somebody is buying it. And that is where you put the controls in. And the state will do its best, but the state cannot, check everything, cannot,
It's not a wave of a wand, it just takes time.
It's going to be like a whack-a-mole, right? It's going to keep showing up somewhere else.
Yes.
you'll have to follow the right business practices. You'll have to put the right controls in place. You make sure, I believe in technology as an equalizer. Our platform allows only, we have the seed to sale tracking. So these products cannot go through it, and only licensed participants can. And the state will need to think through how do you, these ISI certifications that you see in buildings. There are some of these certifications and those standards also that can come up where now you are showing it in those locations which are certified to be licensed, safe, and selling the right
I'm
product.
so glad you said that, Ashwin, because SB 543 includes a decal program, so that you can easily identify legal dispensaries.
Yeah. So these controls have to be put in place, and you all as now responsible owners of and creators of this industry have to share that responsibility and have to drive those outcomes.
Thank you guys so much. We are at time for today, but please, if you have any other questions for the panelists, feel free to find them while they're here for the conference. And Colton and LeafLink, Hill Group and LeafLink both have booths as well, if you'd like to talk some more to them. And thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining us today.
Awesome, thank you.
It was awesome.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. All right, thanks everyone. We are going to welcome Charlie up to introduce himself while we set up for his talk.
Pretend baby star.
Is there a clicker up there for you?
Yeah.
You got it? All right.
Hey, Charlie,
You know.
while you're standing there, will you make a plug for the silent auction?
Everyone, please check out the silent auction. We'll get going here in 5 minutes, so that gives you plenty of time
To bid.
On the silent auction.
Not your first, I'm gonna go tell people.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, they gotta get started. But you look at them and say, well, I can compete with that.
Because if I start at the same time, yeah, they can be some stuck in never how I was into dealing with stuff with government. Because you got, well, hello, Jerry. Just about half an hour ago. No, I didn't forget. I was in Maryland. I was at the facility trying to. I'm glad I went. I swore. So I walked in there and I said, "Oh my God." Huh? No, we still, but it was just water. It's just like it probably happened that morning. So I cut it all off, and yeah, inside the actual building, but the actual, they have like a follow shop for the well system. And I walked in there and thought, oh, it's gonna be crazy. They had feet around there. So from the well, it's perfect. It's just when you got to the building, that's I mean, it's all feet. It's great. So you learn anything? That's what they said. It's up there now, right? Bill? What's the silent for the Kenneth? Huh? Well, like, I don't know. I'll put my name in it. I'll accept it, but I don't. So, yeah, so it's the license out to be given out to individuals. It has our business side. Everything is done. It's just wait for the governor to say, yes, we do. Y'all didn't give me my stadium in Northern Virginia. I ain't get this. It was one of those tips. But I tell people, Washington D.C., I mean, it is used like a bad word, do what we need to do. It worked. Yeah, you see, I hope that they communicate that you are plan B if they don't do plan A. So, worked out for Washington D.C. Secondly, it would be a whole lot more money than just all these homes were being out. So it's not just buildings and infrastructure.
All right, check it. Yep. All right, welcome back, everyone. We're going to go in here in about 30 seconds, but final, well, I guess I'll say it at the end of the presentation as well, but there's a silent auction going on as well, so please check out what's in back. I'm going to be talking about license applications, new licensees, and raising capital based on what I've seen in other states. And it's going to be, let's see, I'll go for about 50 minutes here. So I'll try and leave some time at the end for questions. Let me just start my clock here so I can try and stay on time. Okay, so this is the topic. Obviously, this is pretty relevant for Virginia. I should just say at the outset, before I get into this, that I put some stuff here about Virginia specifically, but this is all based on 642. I haven't had the time to read 543. So there should be a big asterisk on everything here, which is subject to the final bill. So I can't really make any definitive statements about the state until we have a final signed bill. But I can certainly point out the kind of things that I look at when I look at these bills, and I've been doing this since 2015. So have been part of these licensing processes since the beginning, and it's evolved and it continues to evolve. So let's hit it. All right, this is just these initial slides are just marketing for myself and the firm, so you're not super interesting, but this is about how great we are. The best law firm that's ever existed, and we're in a bunch of states. Personally, I am in Maryland. Our office is in Bethesda, Maryland, which is why I'm the person from the firm here. We're very focused on cannabis, hemp, and psychedelics, but we also do other regulated CBD products like alcohol and supplements. This is just a bit about me. My Virginia bar admission is pending. I've submitted, and hopefully I will be admitted in time for the licensing application this upcoming summer, but you can read my bio later if you have any interest. I should point out that if anyone wants a copy of these slides, you could just email me, or you can grab my card after. I'll stick around for about 10 minutes before I try and dodge the snow apocalypse and get back to Silver Spring, Maryland before the world ends. But yeah, happy to share it with you afterwards. And we do a lot of webinars at my firm, so we'll do a webinar once the law is final as well, because then we'll be able to make more sort of definitive statements. I should also point out that it's not just the final law, right? There's also going to be the regulations and the application itself, which I'll talk about that in a second here. But this is just about our merit licensing experience. So we've done merit licensing, for over a decade here. We've won licenses in some of the most competitive rounds, like the first New York round. We just won 3 licenses in Texas, and I'm sure we'll be very successful in Virginia as well. We'll talk about the kind of things to focus on here. All right, and also, since I know everyone wants a new present to give people at Christmas, I highly recommend my book on cannabis law. Kids love it, adults love it. The second edition is currently in production. Unfortunately, it's very, very hard to write books about cannabis law because it changes so frequently. So if you do read this, don't email me and tell me I was wrong. Look at the date it was written. It was correct when it was written, but things have changed subsequently. And we're writing a second edition, which will be coming out whenever the law settles down enough that I can write a second edition. All right, this is the book. Donated all profits to charity. Wrote it with Cassie, my partner. Okay, enough self-promotion. Okay, so you can see here, we'll talk the overview here. So first off, the big one here, this is based on 642. I know that this is not the final bill, and I know that there is, subsequent, well, I guess we got 3 bills going right now. But obviously at the time I was putting this together, this is the only thing I can look at. So we'll be going off of 642, but just understand some of these answers will change. Right, okay. We'll talk about the bill, capitalization requirements, and general tips for a strong application, what we've seen work in other states. Then we'll talk about the post-licensure stage and things you got to think about from a corporate transaction perspective. Then we'll talk about Virginia specifically. Again, a little bit out of date because it's 642. And then finally, we'll finish with talking about federal policy changes, sort of a high-level summary of what we talked about earlier today, but from a corporate perspective in terms of how this impacts both, financings and M&A. All right. So this, again, don't put too much effort into digesting this because it's all going to change. But this is what 642 said. It was introduced January 14th. Retail cannabis market framework, Virginia Cannabis Control Authority. I mean, obviously these are the controversial ones, the timing, app starting July 26, regulations by 2026. Obviously people are focused on the first date you can sell product, but from a legal perspective, the regulations are critical. I talked about it earlier. Everyone gets sort of, I would say one of the sort of common mistakes you see people make is they only look at one source of law. When you're talking about a cannabis market, you've got a few different things you need to look at in order to be able to advise accurately. One, the statute, right, which is what the bill will be engrossed as, right? So you've got the bill itself, then you got the regulations that give further detail to the bill. This will vary state by state. Some states will have a very high-level bill, very detailed regulations, and some states really don't flesh out much in their regulations. But the details can make a huge difference here. So you got to look at the regulations. Then you have to look at the actual applications themselves. In a lot of states, the applications will not line up with the regulations. There will be requirements in the application that do not exist in regulation or in statute. Now, this is of questionable legality, because under the administrative law of various states, you can't necessarily introduce new requirements without going through the rulemaking process, but this happens all the time, that you'll see, regulations will ask for X, and then you get the actual application, and the application will have a question that picks up things that were not mentioned in reg or in statute at all. And that's why, with Virginia this year, each step of the way we'll learn more of the story, but until we see the actual application, you've got to understand everything's got an asterisk on it. Because we've had cases where people have a corporate structure where they say, oh, this is perfect, we found a loophole, we're going to be able to do this, and we'll be on the right side of the law. And then you get the application will have a question like, do you have any other financing arrangements of any sort, direct or indirect, options, warrants? It'll ask all these questions. And there's no way to honestly answer the question no without disclosing sort of your convoluted corporate structure that the regulators aren't going to like. So you just got to understand, until you see that application drop and then the FAQs associated with the application, you don't have the full picture. Retail sales November, licensed 350 stores, 5 tier 5. I know this has changed, so we're not going to focus on that too much. These are the different license types. It is not a market where vertical integration is permitted. So in a lot of states, vertical integration is either prohibited, like in New York, which follows an alcohol 3-tier model, which I believe at one point Virginia was considering. I think I saw that language struck out at one point. But New York's kind of an outlier in that they've adopted an alcohol type model where it's a 3-tier model. You can't be on the production side and the retail side. I think New York's an outlier in that respect. And then you have other markets where you have to be vertically integrated, like a Florida, right? Each license allows you to do pretty much everything other than testing. So it's a very different market experience. Personally, I like a market that's more open. The vertically integrated market, I think, can be challenging for the smaller players. But anyway, these are the different license types. Again, I'll go through this quickly because it's all going to change. You see, this is another one that's highly controversial, the conversion fee. So this is just in the initial draft. It may not ultimately be $10 million. Yeah, one thing I noticed that's interesting, you've got the conversion fee. This was in New York as well. And in New York, though, it's a $20 million conversion fee. But in New York, the medical operators, which they call registered organizations or ROs, were allowed to be vertically integrated. So they had a competitive, well, they still do have a competitive advantage in New York versus the other operators, which not necessarily the case in Virginia, where you can be vertically integrated even if you don't have one of these original licenses. We talked about vertical integration. There are limitations, however, regarding undue influence. Undue influence is a concept that's been borrowed from alcohol. So it doesn't necessarily fit neatly into a market where you're allowed to be vertical. In alcohol, where you have the 3-tier system, you have the producers, you have the retailers, you have the distributors, and they're supposed to be separate. And there are these strict regulations in alcohol about undue influence because they don't want the producers controlling the retailers, because that's what happened prior to prohibition, and there were all these negative social effects. And then the other thing that's a little bit new in Virginia is this concept of undue market concentration being taken into account for M&A transactions. So sort of similar to federal antitrust, where they don't want you to get too much market power. I haven't really seen that in cannabis. Prioritization of impact licenses. So yeah, very common new trend in this era of cannabis to try and give a leg up to sort of a group of licenses seen as, they don't use the term equity here, they call them impact licenses, but people who have sort of been harmed by the drug war, to give them a chance. And we'll talk a lot about that later. Okay, application process. So there's a number of different types of application processes that we've seen. historically in cannabis in the US and also currently in the US. So again, don't have the final answer here, but from what I've seen, 642, this looks like a competitive application. There was language in the Joint Commission that came out on December 2nd that talked about an audit of lottery processes. So, that's why I was thinking, well, maybe they'll do a lottery, right? Obviously, as people that provide licensing services, we love competitive licensing as opposed to lottery. With a competitive license, you having a strong application is critical, right? Because it's not a lottery, you're gonna get graded. So you wanna be at the top of the pile. So what do you do at this stage, right? So, we're still early, it's still January, the licenses aren't gonna be due until July probably. What should you be doing today to ensure that you're successful, right? So, well, what determines a successful license, right? So you've got application readiness and team. Those are sort of, and I guess the other thing would be real estate. Those are your 3 keys to a successful license. The 4th one is not applicable to everyone, but obviously if you're an impact license, you have to qualify as an impact license. So those are 3 things you can start working on today, right? Who's on your team, right? Obviously you got the service providers, the attorney, the CPA, but you've also got a medical director, which is probably not relevant for an adult use application, but subject matter experts, right? Who does the state want to license? Ultimately, the state wants to license people that are going to sell safe, compliant products in a responsible manner, and then are going to be able to actually open their business and stay open, right? So, if you look at the team, if nobody on the team has run a cannabis business before, what are the odds that you're going to run a successful, compliant cannabis business? It's not particularly high, right? So at this point in time, this is when you start, the matchmaking process begins. You got to put the team together. Application readiness, this is where I come in. I'm just going to touch on, so we'll just talk real estate real quick. Real estate, obviously, critical for cannabis. It's harder, it's much more important on the retail side because you got to have a good location for retail. When you're talking about cultivation or processing, you have a lot more options in terms of where you could be located. But retail's tough. There's no local licensing in Virginia. You don't have to get a local license, but the local still determines zoning. And in 642, it was a mile apart, according to the suggestion, which is, that's a huge distance between stores. They shrunk it to 1,000 feet. We'll see where it finally settles. But if you think about it, if you got to be 1,000 feet from another store, 1,000 feet from a school, what have you, right? And you got hit zoning, that cuts down the geographic area that you can locate a store, right, considerably. And not only that, but I mean, you got to have good parking, right, in a store. You want to be someplace that's convenient for people. So there's not that many good locations, in any given state. So obviously this real estate, huge part of the thing, not really what I do. What I'm focused on is application readiness, which is what is your corporate structure and what is your financing? So let's just talk about like what I would call table stakes, right? So table stakes for corporate application readiness is you've got your books in order. The company's been formed, the company's in good standing, everyone who's part of the company has signed a shareholders agreement or an operating agreement. If you're using special IP, you've got the right to use the IP. I mean, this is really basic stuff, but you got to get it right. Now, then we get into sort of what I would say, which is important, which is the financing piece. So, again, this is all pretty basic stuff that's not particularly difficult. Just talk about labor peace agreement can be something to do, but you've got a bunch of boxes to check. You want to check them all, but this is sort of where I come in and what I'm going to talk about here, which is money, right? Which is very, very important for getting a business off the ground, right? So some different states have different approaches when it comes to capitalization requirements to win a new license. Some states will require you to put a certain amount of money in trust or to have a bond, right? That thing makes things a little bit more difficult because you got to find a trustee, you got to find a bank, You got to get your investors comfortable putting the money in. What happens if you don't win the license? As far as I can tell, there's no clear capitalization requirement in Virginia yet, but the license can be refused if you have not demonstrated financial responsibility sufficient to meet the requirements of a business proposed to be licensed. So that's why I say you got to think about, well, the rules might have some sort of capitalization requirement. I don't think they would throw something at the application stage, but it's possible. If any regulators are watching this, I'm going to start giving my sort of view on what I would do if I was a regulator. Any kind of capitalization requirement that's specific should be provided to the licensees as soon as possible, because it takes a while to figure this stuff out. And my big message to regulators is, I know what regulators are trying to do when they come up with these strict rules, right? They don't want licensees to be used as sort of pawns by capital staying behind the curtain and, you know, controlling the business. But the problem is, if you make the rules too strict, nobody is going to invest in these businesses. And if you make it impossible to raise money from the business, you've essentially made the decision. The only people we're going to license are people who are independently wealthy. Because if you cut off the ability to raise capital, that gives a huge competitive advantage to people with family money.
So do you feel like Maryland is that way?
Yes, I do.
Because look, to me, there's very few investors actually in Maryland, because you don't have a say-so in the business. They could take your money and say a portion is a good marketing tool. I just think it's very limited. I just happen to be somebody like-minded that way. And it was just, to me, Maryland was like, it told everything, the story after the lottery was given. It's like, oh, by the way, you got to have money. And it's like, everybody's like, what are you talking about? You didn't tell us that up front. I might not apply for the lottery, but you told us after I got the lottery, now I got to go find money. But capitalization is very hard to get.
I agree with you 100%. And I think the regulators have some discretion, which I've advocated that they exercise, to make the restrictions less onerous. They read the rules, the statute, differently than I do. Obviously, they can't change the statute. That would require a bill to be run this year. But at least in Virginia, you know, the bill isn't signed yet. So my advice for Virginia is talk to people in Maryland that are social equity licenses that are trying to raise money. And you take something which is already pretty difficult. It's very hard to raise money in today's environment, right? It's not 2017 anymore. And then you add this additional layer, which is we're going to expect your investor to put money into a business with less protection than they would get if they invested into, you know, a winery, let's say, or, you know, any other, you know, a tech startup, right? If you invest in a tech startup, investors expect a standard set of protections, right? Because they don't want their money to be misused. They want to feel protected because they themselves might have investors they have to answer to. So my plea for Virginia is let people set up structures that investors will invest in, because it's already hard enough convincing someone to invest in your business. To ask them to take that additional leap of faith and go in unprotected in sort of what I would say is an unnatural commercial arrangement is a bridge too far. And it's made it really difficult, because I work with a number of social equity licensees in Maryland, and it's really tough because to tell their investors, like, listen, I get it, you want to have this veto right, but look, they have to have unanimous control. You know, any contract over $10,000, they have to have the unanimous ability to sign it. So, yeah, I agree with you 100%. But yeah, so anyway, there's no specific number that you got to show. Maybe they'll come up with a specific number later in the process, but you got to show money. You know, usually what we say, if there's not a specific number, you want to show we've got access to X dollars, and here's our business plan showing that we can build this business for X dollars, right? Because otherwise, you don't want to go into the application and say, hey, we need $5 million, we have like $100,000, and we'll figure out the rest when you give us the license. Even if that's the case, which we'll talk about, like, you don't necessarily need to use that money, because sometimes it's money you're just showing you've got the capacity. Maybe later you get new investors. Those are sort of my points right there. Okay, so take a step back. I'm just going to talk about big picture. How do cannabis regulations impact corporate transactions, right? Because this is very important for after you win your license. Because after you win your license, what are you going to want to do? You might want to build your business by buying another license. You're going to have to raise capital, whether that be through debt or equity. You might want to do IP licensing deals, right? Bring in a big brand from out of state, set up a deal like that. So in some, I would say 75% to 85% of a corporate transaction is the same, whether you're talking about, mining, SaaS, AI, cannabis, right? It's similar, much of it is very similar, but the part that's not similar in cannabis can make or break a deal. So without getting into the Virginia specifics, which I can't really cover, I'll just talk about the issues that we've seen over the past decade, right? So initial licensing, sometimes you can't change ownership during a preliminary licensing phase. So like, for example, in Minnesota right now, or in New York, nobody can change control of the license yet because they're not at that licensing process stage, right? So you may get a license and they can say, okay, you have a preliminary license until it's final, you can't change control, but you can sell a non-controlling stake. This is important if you're planning to just flip your license immediately, just be aware you can't do it. For impact licenses, social equity, there's often a longer term restriction on flipping the license, which I know the last panel talked about. This is one of those things where there's an argument on both sides, right? You don't want people to be taken advantage of, but on the other hand, if you tell someone, hey, the most valuable asset your family owns, you can't sell, it doesn't always benefit them. All right, M&A considerations. These don't always apply in every state, but these are your big picture things. Do you need written pre-approval to close a deal? Not always required. In California, depending on the locality you're in, you can often do an M&A deal, and you don't need pre-approval to close the deal, but certainly the trend in states is to require written pre-approval. Is there local license approval required? So again, California, sometimes the locals will have an approval process that's more onerous than the state. Not going to be an issue in Virginia. Are workarounds regulated? So, it used to be that you'd have these really strict rules, but then, you could just do an MSA or an IP licensing agreement or an option agreement. There's a lot of workarounds, but the regulators have gotten wise to this, and they now strictly regulate these workarounds. The big one to look out for is, do they regulate convertible securities, so an option agreement, right? Because you could say, okay, I can't sell my business, but I'm going to sell you the right to buy my business in 5 years, and effectively I've sold my business. So you see this in a lot of states. And I guess to my earlier point, talking about the different sources of law, the last, final, and frankly most important source of law is how do the regulators enforce the rules they've set up? This is an incredibly difficult thing to answer as a lawyer, because if you pick a state like New York, you could say, hey, can I sell my license? I would say, well, according to the black letter law, no, you cannot sell control of your license. But the guy whose store is down the street just sold his license. Yes, hundreds of licenses in New York have effectively traded hands, and the regulators haven't done a thing about it. So this is why, I mean, to the earlier point about making sure you have a lawyer who's experienced. You need some of these deals, you want to have someone who's done deals in that market, because the regulators in cannabis do not always enforce the rules evenly or at all, right? And you go to LA today, there's tons of totally illegal brick and mortar stores, right? Which, someone's like, oh, you need a license to open a store in California. You actually really don't. You actually really don't. They will not necessarily shut you down. So you got to understand the rules are not always enforced. How difficult it is to move a license? Critical, because if you've got a bad lease, happened to a lot of people that sign these IIPR leases, that have escalator rent clauses, and now they're getting their lease payments, or their rent is through the roof. Is the license still valuable? Can I move it to a better location to get out of this terrible lease? And then, what are others in the market doing, right? So like New York is my example here, where all the cannabis lawyers in New York talk about now is when are the regulators going to enforce their rules on M&A, because they haven't done it to date, which makes it very, very difficult to advise clients, because we can tell them, hey, here's the law, but by the way, the the regulators don't enforce the law. So, it puts us in a difficult position. So that's another thing I would say to the regulators is it doesn't matter what the regulations say, it matters what you enforce. And to the earlier point about talking about the illicit market, my plea to the regulators is you can't think of the job of a regulator is not to enforce the law against one sliver of the market, right? You have to think about cannabis as there's a cannabinoid market. The cannabinoid market consists of state licensed cannabis, intoxicating hemp, the illicit market, and home grow, right? So there are 4 aspects of the cannabinoid market in any given state. If all you do is come down hard on the state licensed operators, you're just gonna push the market into those other 3 categories, which aren't regulated at all. So my plea to regulators, to legislators is you have to treat these buckets the same from an enforcement perspective because they are substitute goods. And you cannot just come down on the people that are trying to follow the law because you're basically saying like, if you try and do the right thing, we're gonna kick you in the shins. But if you just break the law, have at it. We don't care. I mean, it makes 0 sense. Equity considerations, right? So we're talking about equity raising, right? The big thing to think about here is what's the materiality level for approval. So if you have a low materiality level, like the Joint Commission proposal had no materiality threshold, that means every new person you add to your cap table requires regulatory approval. That's a terrible way to do it. It makes it very, very hard to raise money. I'm told the new bill, 642 at 10%, I'm told the new bill has 5%. That's very doable. Because when you raise money, it's unusual to have one shareholder who's above 5%, which means you can close an equity financing without regulatory approval, which is going to make your life much easier. Because the last thing you want to do is have money tied up, subject to some regulator blessing your offering. Because you need that money to build your business, and the regulators never move as fast as you want to do. So that's important. But also be aware that certain things can require approval, right? Veto rights, elements of control, board seats, a CEO. This kind of stuff often requires regulatory approval. So you got to look at the equity financing from a background of what does what kind of approval do I need to get here, right? One of the first questions. Other thing is, this is a big one. You got to understand what the background check looks like. And it may not be a background check that occurs prior to the raise. It may be a background check that occurs at renewal, right? And this is why I was saying, this is why you got to know the market, because you got to look around the corner and say, hey, they're not going to ask now, but when you get to renewal, the regulators are going to want all the natural persons in your cap table, and they're going to want their date of birth, right? You can't necessarily, like, if a wealthy person or a private equity fund invests in your business, and then you ask them 6 months later, hey, I need your social security, they may not give it to you. Because if it's a fund, they may not know who their LPs are. So you don't want, this is like a common issue. And it's never that people fail the background check because, oh, it turns out I had some Russian oligarch give me money, right? Who's on some, I know this has happened, but it's never happened to me. But it's never like, oh, by the way, one of our investors is wanted for war crimes in the Donbass, right? I've never seen that happen. But what I see happen is, I got money from some wealthy real estate investor. The state's like, I need his fingerprints. And the wealthy guy's like, yeah, no, I'm not giving my fingerprints to the state. And it puts you as the licensee in an impossible position where you've got an investor who's not going to do what you say and a regulator who's going to hold up your license. So try and get ahead of that. Debt. So by the way, I should note that I didn't see anything in 642 about debt, but some states will regulate debt. Some states require disclosure. Some states require pre-approval. Some states will background check lenders above a certain level, like New York, above a certain amount. If the lender is getting paid enough interest every year, it could be considered a true party of interest or an owner and thus subject to background check. Are there restrictions on collateral? Like, can you put a lien on the license? Can you put a lien on the collateral? And bear in mind, putting a lien on the collateral is one thing. Actually enforcing the lien is another, but that's more the lender's issue than the lender's issue. What happens in insolvency is there a receivership process. Most states now have a process by which a licensee can go through receivership. Remember, you're banned from federal bankruptcy because you're running an illegal business. So you're pretty much stuck to state level remedies, which are, there's receivership, there's Article 9, there's an ABC, which is basically dissolution. Those are the big one now that people are using is Article 9, which is basically you sell the thing at auction. All right, so this is my advice for everyone in terms of raising capital generally. One, anticipate investor regulatory questions. So just if the investor is sophisticated, they want to know what happens in insolvency, what level of control can I have, is this subject to written pre-approval? Make sure you know this answer as part of your capital raising process so you can give them a quick overview. Two, and I see this all the time, is sometimes people, creativity, there's times to be creative and there's times to color within the lines. When it comes to setting up a financing structure, my advice is to color within the lines, because there's a culture of raising capital in America that uses certain forms, right? There's the convertible note, there's the SAFE, there's the Series A, right? And a lot of this stuff is coming from tech. Though it differs by industry, right? Like there's a way of raising money in real estate, a way of raising money for restaurants. You don't want your investor to say, I like this investment, but they cooked up the strangest financing structure I've ever seen in my life. So just be boring when it comes to the regulatory structure. And there's plenty of people out there who can tell you, like what a normal rate to raise money is. But I would just say, don't reinvent the wheel on this one. Understand how capital is raised. And then my other thing is, investors, I'll get on my soapbox again here, but wealthy people always think they're right. So whenever someone goes out to raise money, they're going to come back and they're saying, oh, I talked to this investor yesterday and he said, who's your lawyer? Your lawyer is a fucking idiot. And I'm like, okay, I get it. They're used to doing things their way. They're a real estate investor. There's a certain way you raise money in real estate, right? There's not necessarily a right or wrong way for these things, because it's like if someone's coming from the tech world, right? They're like, we did a SAFE note, then we did a Series A. If someone's coming from the real estate world, they're like, it's 80-20, so you get your hurdle and then it flips. So there are different ways of raising money. So just be aware that the background an investor have will influence what they think is normal. And that's why it's difficult to do it in a way that keeps everyone happy. Ultimately, what you want is a structure that enough people think is normal to get it done. And if you have to do something weird, it's okay, but do something weird because it gets the money in the door. Securities law, it's illegal federally, you're still subject to state and federal securities law, so make sure you have adequate disclosure. This is the kind of thing that doesn't matter until it does. Once people lose money, then they're gonna look at the documents and say, hey, what did they do wrong? I'm gonna sue them. So that's why I remember a client, I sent him the documents and he said, Charlie, you don't work in marketing, do you? Because I sent him a list of like risk factors, like every million thing that could go wrong. He was like, this is gonna scare people. I said, yeah, but get it signed now, and if you lose your investors' money, you're gonna love me for making you do this. And they lost their investor money. So I'm glad I did this, because it's the kind of thing that gets you sued. And you hope people don't read it too carefully, but because it's scary. I mean, like the risk factors you sign when you invest in a business is like, yeah, I could lose all my money. There's 5 billion things that could go wrong with this business. And you do that because you don't want someone saying, there was a material risk to the business that you didn't tell me about. Therefore, you committed securities fraud. So, I'm suing you personally, I'm suing your lawyer. I've just been, a little paranoid about these kind of things. Be wary of investors without previous cannabis industry experience. It's like the background check thing, right? If someone's gone through the background check process, they get it. If someone has only invested in unregulated businesses, they're not going to understand why things require approval, why things move so slowly. You got to just give them that 101 up front. Obviously, be positive about it, but you want to be careful about it. And the last thing is, If it seems too good to be true, it's a scam. My favorite scam that people do is they send you a term sheet, they drag you along, you get into closing, and they're like, okay, well, I just need you to wire $50,000 so we can run this credit check to cover due diligence costs before we close. And my answer to that is, okay, just fund net of the costs at closing, right? Fund net meaning like it's $1 million, you fund $950,000 instead of $1 million. And then we need it up front. Well, it's like, you need it up front because you're gonna take that money and we're never gonna hear from you again, okay? This has happened numerous times and clients get very upset. They're like, well, why didn't you tell me, not to do this deal? Why did you wait till the last minute? I was like, well, I didn't know it was a scam for sure until they demanded the money up front, because that's like a guarantee of a scam. Like every big lender out there in cannabis, and these guys are, they're tough guys, but they're gonna fund net. They're not gonna want the money up front. They're always gonna get paid back, but they're not gonna ask for the money up front. So you gotta be really careful here with some of these deals. Because, once you wire that money, you're gonna find out, oh, the person I was talking to is actually located halfway across the world or something. They've been doing something shady. So just be careful, because there's a lot of dishonest people in the world, unfortunately. All right, this is Virginia stuff. This is, again, base 642, so I don't know for sure. You're gonna miss the exciting end of the presentation, Rodney. All right, ownership is 10%. That's a big thing to watch out for. I think they lowered it to 5%, which is doable. Office directors, managers are gonna be background checked. They want to trace through all intermediary entities. Disclosure required to ultimate beneficial owners, but that's subject to a 10% clause. There's no statutory exemption for public companies. Some states will treat private companies different than public companies, because for a public company, they do not have a list of all their shareholders, because you have your NOBOs, your non-objective beneficial owners, and then you have your OBOs, your objective beneficial owners. So for a lot of people, for a public company, they'll just be like Vanguard. So they won't know who actually holds it, they just know the brokerage name. So they put in these rules, but I think it's unfair to treat private companies and public companies differently. But they got a 5% threshold right now. Vertical integration permitted, subject to caps, 5 total licenses per person, with that 5% threshold, only 1 tier 5 per person, micro businesses are fully siloed, and testing prohibited from holding plant touching interests. That's you see that in all the states, because they try and keep testing different. It's not an issue because all the testing companies have the same requirements in other states. So, Green Analytics, as someone mentioned earlier, is a good example, would be like they're not going to have non-testing interests in other states because you have that same rule in every other state. This one was interesting. It says if you have a cumulative 25% change of control within 25 months, that requires approval. I haven't really seen something like that. This is a little bit new to me in Virginia. So like I said, with the 5% threshold, theoretically you could sell like virtually a company without approval, because you could just sell it to like 20 different people at 4%, as long as they're separate. But this would obviously pick that up. Just moving quickly here so I have time for some questions. Yeah, CCA approval is required for financing agreements. So that might mean debt. I don't want to say for sure, but you may need approval for debt. Who knows what a financing agreement is? Management agreements and brand licensing agreements. So those are your common workarounds for deals, so you're going to need approval for those. So, this is like, when cookies come in, when Stizzy comes in, right? They're going to do it through brand licensing probably. Undue influence factors, and this is from alcohol. I think the book to read, it's called Toward Alcohol Control. It was written in like 1933, commissioned by Rockefeller. But this book is like the backbone for how alcohol is regulated in the United States. The thing to understand is, pre-prohibition, the saloon was owned by the producer. So like the big brewers would also control the saloon. And things got out of control. And the saloons, there was all sorts of illegal activity. There was a lot of, tremendous alcoholism problems in the country, and they still are. But so what they really wanted to do, the anti-alcohol people, after prohibition was repealed, was have the government control the alcohol industry pretty much soup to nuts. which is sort of what you have in some states, like New Hampshire, right? Live free or die, unless you want to run a liquor store. In this case, you may be the government. But what they don't want the producers controlling the retailers. So that's where this undue influence comes. So like price setting and shelf space. Of course, there is vertical integration allowed here. So what I think they're really worried about is more about concentration and control, right? Because you could have one big producer who's dominating all the production and basically telling all the retailers, like, I'm going to tell you where your bar products go in your store. I'm going to set the price. And therefore, they're controlling the whole industry. And then, yeah, aggressive lender investor control. Market concentration limits. This one's a little bit new. So this is the HHI, which is sort of a economics formula to determine how much of the market someone controls. We don't really have any details on this, but essentially, you could be under the license cap, but they could say, hey, we think it gives you too much control of the market. I think it's an interesting idea. I mean, I don't like when the markets are overly controlled, but I think capitalism requires distribution of production and power, or else it creates a lot of issues. So, conceptually, it seems like a good idea. Yeah, impact licenses. 66% ownership and control must remain with qualifying individuals. This is one where I would say to the regulators, talk to people from other states. I know the New York people are in the ears of the regulators here in the Commonwealth. You got to understand what's realistic, right? Because it's going to be tough to get someone to invest in an impact license if they can have no control. They shouldn't have all the control, but they need some control to protect their investment. And I think that balance needs to be struck. And then, with these restrictions on transfer, we see it time and time again, like the market finds a way. If you create a system where there's no way to buy or sell a license, and you don't strictly enforce it, you will see M&A activity occur, sort of under the table. So you can't create like an unnatural environment, right? Where licenses can't change hands. That's just not normal in a business cycle, because businesses go on. What happens if the business goes under? It's just going to shut its doors. Wouldn't it be better to let someone sell it? So that's more of a policy issue here. Obviously, there's a lot of risk for an outside investor going into an impact license, because they're thinking to themselves, okay, I'm putting my money at risk, but I could also get in trouble. Maryland has this law where it's a misdemeanor to have someone as a straw man on a license, so the investor could get in criminal trouble, right? So it's like, now you're telling me not only am I going to lose my money, you're going to come after me personally because you say, oh, I violated your laws. You know what? I'm going to save myself a headache, and I'm going to invest in like a Dunkin' Donuts franchise instead. And congratulations, now you've taken this impact licensee's money away without replacing it. Now, so that's why I was going to say you got to have a way for people to finance these businesses. Federal policy, really quick. The only thing I would add to about this morning's conversation is, which I think covered it, is two things. One is that even if the executive order hasn't come into effect yet, I think it's great news for the business, for the industry, because it's finally good news that we can share with investors. The President of the United States, came out and said we should move this to Schedule 3. And Pam Bondi may not be a big fan of cannabis, but she's not really known for her independent action from the president. And then the other thing here is this new, so a lot of this is Howard Kessler is running this Medicare pilot program. Howard Kessler is a great guy who's been a strong advocate of medical cannabis for a long time. And in order for him to run his Medicare pilot program, they're going to have to change the definition of hemp. So that's why you started to see, there is political pressure to fix hemp. How that plays out, I don't know for sure, but obviously Virginia has a 2 milligram cap. So even if they put a 3 or 4 milligram cap at the federal level, the state law will still apply. But of course, part of that is also a question of enforcement, right? It doesn't matter what the law says, it matters what you enforce. All right, anyone have any questions?
Yes. Okay, we have one question online. We have just a few minutes before our next panel, but let me do this one quickly. This is from Radhika, and she asks, I have a company, Home Baked, that sells CBD in Virginia. will I have to set up a new company to apply for a license?
I mean, I don't know if you have to set up a new license, a new company, but I would certainly keep it separate. I mean, I would not recommend keeping, because they're regulated different at the federal level. So presumably, whatever happens with hemp definition, you're going to want to keep that CBD business completely federally legal, and you're going to want to keep it separate because your taxes are going to be different, your banking is going to be different.
All right, Paul.
You talked earlier about the scams and those kinds of things. I've noticed the last year, I get emails and people contacting me asking, because there's people out here on the net advertising to get you a Virginia cannabis license. And it's a package deal for like $4,999. Could you just speak to that? Because I've tried to tell people that it's a scam, they can't get their license because their industry's not done, but they're calling people and coming to events like this. And then the people go home and they start getting blasted with emails and texts, people trying to get them. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think
other ways people are.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of unethical activity in the license consulting space, right? And I would just say, the first thing I would say is like the big thing really about all this kind of stuff is a lot of these people are judgment proof, meaning that you could have a great lawsuit against them, but like you can't nail them down, right? Either they've got no money, or it's some shady entity set up something. So you can never. So you got to be careful about like there are people that are easy to sue, for better or worse. I'm in that bucket of people that are easy to sue, and which means that you can kind of like, I got to stand behind what I say because people can find me easily. A lot of these fly-by-night businesses, you got no recourse, and we've been part of this. We've been chasing this unethical application consultant now that we got a judgment against to try and get them to collect for a client, and it's been very difficult collecting on the judgment. But I would also say, the way you push them is like ask them, right? First off, the bill's not even done yet. I mean, how are you gonna get you? First off, you can't guarantee a license in a competitive process. And you see, the second thing, in all these processes, you always see like, so-and-so was promised a license by so-and-so. I hear that a lot, and some of it's real, right? It's like there's grift, right? Unfortunately in the world, but some of it's just like, politics, people like rumors in politics, I feel like you got to take it all with a grain of salt. But I guess my 2 cents is like, I'm very cautious about anything you have to pay for up front. To me, it's like there's a retainer we charge people up front, but it's like otherwise it's kind of pay as you go. And if we stop working, you stop paying, right? But if you pay someone everything up front, how do you know they're going to follow through? Like I don't like to pay for anything up front because it takes away your leverage.
I think I have 2 questions. You alluded to the 66% ownership, and you made the comment about having to balance the needs of that versus the investor. And my sense was, you think the 66% is too much?
I don't know if it's the percentage, it's the control piece.
Okay, right.
Because the investor is going to want to have protection over their investment. So I think you have to find a way to balance. I think 66 is fine because like investors usually take, it's like maybe you're taking 30 or 40%, right? So they don't need to have most of the shares, but they just have to feel like they're protected.
So the devil's in the details.
I think so, yeah.
Sounds good. The other question, you talked about you said 4 elements: the legal market, the illegal market, the hemp industry, and one other. And you spoke about the laws actually forcing people out of the legal market into some of the illegals.
Yeah.
Say that again, please.
Yeah, so I was going to say I think I'm forgetting the name of the book by these 2 economists out of California, but it was like, why legal cannabis will lose or something like that. And they said, these are substitute goods from an economics perspective, right? Like if you want to get high, you can get Delta 8 shipped to your door, you can go to a dispensary. You can get high, you can order Delta 8 to your door, you can go to a dispensary, you can call up your old dealer, or you can grow plants on your own, right? So if you create a system where it's like the dispensary down the block is paying, an additional, 24% tax is what Michigan just put in place, their prices are going to be higher. So, you know, a certain percentage of people will be like, well, I'm going to call my dealer because he's got access to great stuff from California and it's 20% cheaper, right? So you push people, and the people that push are like, and I'm not an economist, but cannabis consumers are pretty price sensitive. And, you know, a lot of the people that are keeping the stores afloat are your sort of like your younger people, they're heavy consumers. And if they're heavy consumers, they're particularly price sensitive, right? Because they're young, they don't have enough money, and they want to get a lot of stuff because they're heavy consumers. And those are the people that are easy to push in one direction or another. And once they realize, hey, I can get Delta 8 shipped to my door, it's cheap, it's convenient, and it's going to get just, you know, I don't like, you know, I wouldn't smoke that with someone else's lungs, but some people like that stuff, or, you know what I mean? So those people are easy to like push in one direction, and like that shifts the market a little bit. It's tough for stores, you know. In Maryland, people have told me like, oh, they shut down the head shop down the block. I'm seeing my old customers again. So, you know, it's like both and, yeah. But again, I don't think there's great data on this, and I would love some economists to study it.
This air is 543 pushing people out.
I have not read 543 because it came out yesterday when I was here, but I'm hopeful that we've got great voices in the ears of the legislators here, and I'm hopeful we can craft a bill that's a compromise, and that, because ultimately, the problem is everyone thinks like, oh, if we create this perfect, I'll give it last, I don't have time, but I was just going to say one last thing. So the classic example of this is Governor Newsom comes out with a law about hemp beverages, right? And, you know, basically banning these intoxicating hemp products in California. And then he comes out with a release, he says, we have a 99.3% compliance rate with this intoxicating hemp bill we passed. How do you come up with that number? Well, they went to all the licensed liquor stores in California and they saw which ones were selling hemp beverages, right? So it's like, okay, I can come up with a really high number if my denominator, right, is only state licensed stores that are going to follow the rules. He wasn't counting the illegal, illicit brick and mortar stores in LA, which the majority of stores in LA. He wasn't counting all these head shops and gas stations. It's like, okay, well, like, of course you came up with a great percentage. Like, you just cut out all the people that are breaking the rules from your mouth. So it's like garbage in, garbage out with your data. You know what I mean? It makes no sense, and unfortunately, it's failing the consumer, right? Because you're pushing people to consume products that are not tested and unsafe, and it defeats the purpose. I think the problem is, from a regulation perspective, it's a lot easier to enforce the law against people that are licensed because they got to come for you for renewal. The head shop's not coming. You have no like direct power. But I do think it's just a matter of will. I mean, it's like, these places are not hidden, right? It's not like you have to go to Cyprus and find some hacker in a basement. I mean, it's a brick and mortar institution. Like, you can use Google. I mean, I could find a bunch of these places today with just my phone, you know? I think it's a matter of, you just gotta, the budget needs to be set so that a certain percentage of the enforcement budget is dedicated to these people that are totally unlicensed. Like, you gotta treat people, you gotta make sure it's a level playing field.
We have a bill for that.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. All right, friends, we are going to switch over to our next and final You're welcome to just get on up there.
I can open it. Yeah.
Say, welcome back. And then just do it.
This panel is the ancillary cannabis.
And then at some point, I just heard about this new bill that was introduced yesterday.
I'll cue you, not Peter. Someone's mic is here.
It's here.
Okay, you ready?
Welcome back to the 2026 Virginia Cannabis Association Conference. This is the 4 o'clock talk that is on the ancillary cannabis businesses. So my name is Mark Tavares. I own a company called Rooting VA, and we actually are a cannabis touching business. We are a hemp business in the Doswell area, so I'm the hemp touching side that can give a little bit of insight. And then we have 2 businesses beside me that are non-cannabis touching.
My name is Peter Hillary. I am co-owner of Homegrown VA. We are a specialty gardening supply company focusing primarily on cannabis education and cannabis supplies.
I'm Tristan Craig with Hyena Club. I'm the owner, and we specialize in processing and technology that is going to be needed in everyday business and cannabis operations.
So between us, obviously we've been in business since 2021, and we've gone through the, I guess you could call it rigmarole, or the washer machine aspect that this industry can put you through. So if you are going into open a business that is non-cannabis touching, I would say there are a few things that you might need to know ahead of time that you can run into. I know when I got into the business, I did not think that I would have run into quite as much red tape as I did when I am growing a legal plant with licenses from the state. So I know that Peter, with his store, which is a grow supply store, they've run into the same issues as well. So one thing I would say is banking is always something that you want to be very open with, and go to the bank, show them your business plan, show them everything you're doing. My hemp company in 21, we had our personal accounts and our company account in the same bank. We got a letter in the mail. It had one check. It had both amounts, and they said, "You're a risky business. We closed your personal account. We closed your business account, and here you go." So that's really fun to then figure out how to cut that check up and put it on your taxes.
Sometimes they don't, they just mail you that check too. We had this very similar situation where we actually just went to go purchase something and realized that our cards were getting declined. And then when we contacted the bank, they told us that a check was mailed to us and we should receive it in 5 to 7 business days, and that our accounts were closed.
Always fun. So banking, something that I would say, make sure you go to that bank, you talk to them, you sit down with them, and they're okay with what you're doing. Another one would be credit card processors. That has always been really, really fun. Whether it's, you can go to the big ones like Stripe and all of those. They do have forms for CBD or hemp or cannabis, and they usually let you in. You do a few $1,000s worth of work, and then they just shut your account down. Or PayPal takes all of your money and keeps it for 380 days. Yeah, I think a few people have been here. I think I've been through, I'm on my 6th credit card processor. I've had them since 2023, but they've been great. So
always do your due diligence, make sure you're with a few, and I know that there's a couple out there now that are really good at it without a very high processing fee.
And I would just say for cannabis adjacent companies as well, when we talk about the shop, we very much say a specialty gardening center as opposed to a grow shop. Because simply based on the fact of our logo having a cannabis leaf in it, and our association with cannabis, even though there's nothing at our shop that we sell that is illegal on a federal or state level for it, I can't tell you how many times I have had that we are promoting the cultivation of a Schedule I narcotic. So we have been shut down by banks, credit card processors, insurance companies. And then the worst part is, like, as Mark was saying, going into those businesses and actually talking to someone, because you will take a million phone calls where someone says, oh, absolutely, we can do that. It's not going to be any problem. It'll be no issue at all. We do these other companies, blah, blah, blah. And then the minute it gets to an underwriting, an underwriter gets their hands on it, suddenly that offer will just be taken away from you.
I used to have the word canna in my company name. That dinged me a lot. So any type of promotion, any type of ad, any type of traditional marketing style, it absolutely cut me out of. So our company, Rooting VA, now we can do a lot more. So that is nice. It was an unfortunate way to change my name, but life goes on. So we had that. Tristan with the Hyena Club doesn't have the word canna or a cannabis leaf in it. And I think that is that was a smart move.
Yes.
So if you are opening some sort of business like that, think about maybe something that references the industry but is not anywhere close to the industry. So that way you can market a little bit easier.
And do a trademark search and check and make sure no big corporations even have a slight part of the business name or brand you want to create.
That is highly accurate. My company name was Commonwealth Canna. There is a canna nutrient company that is worldwide. They sued me and 21 other companies or 20 other companies about a year ago because I have canna in my name and they trademarked the word canna. So
I say just in general, if you're going to get this business, get used to people threatening to sue you as well. I had spent my entire life never getting threatened to be sued until I got into this industry, and now I have been threatened to sue multiple times. They get dropped most of the time, unless it's a massive company, trying to pull a trademark on you. But yes, get used to that feeling.
I would say the good thing is if you're not in the business and you're looking to get into it, you are stepping in at a time where a lot of other people have gone through all of the issues and a lot of that's been fixed. So that is really nice. But if you are going into a non-touching business, make sure you talk to the local government that you're going into, that they are okay with a business like yours. If you are selling any type of grow supply or any type of product, talk to the growers that you're getting it from. Go sit down with them, meet with them, and get all of that information from them so that then you can pass it on to your customers. I think that's going to be in your benefit tremendously.
I mean, I would say, to that note as well, remember that your local, the state, and the federal government may also view what you're doing in a very different way from each other. So you may have things like, we have the luxury of being inside the city of Richmond. The city of Richmond has much bigger issues and does not necessarily, care too much as long as we, just take care of our side of it. However, we had significantly more problems with the state. And then, once you go on to things that you may not even think would cross into federal lines. So like Mark said, advertising. Any form of advertising at this point, because most of it is digital, is all going to be held under federal government regulations, not under state regulations. Insurance, anything that's crossing lines is now going to be regulated by the federal government, not regulated by your locality. So even if your locality has no problem with you, there still may be issues that arise on a bigger scale for it.
Does anyone have any questions? We can just keep talking about it, but if anyone has any specific questions, please let us know.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned processors that are okay now with everything. Can you name one or two?
So I personally use authorize.net. They've been really good. And I know that Primo, Primo Payments is a cannabis style processor that does really well. I've spoken to them, I've given them all my information, but I did not use them. So you might
not use Primo.
I have not used them personally, but their customer service was awesome. I was just a little late applying for it, and my other one approved me. You'll get into a process of like, hey, I'll put an application to these 4 different companies. Whoever comes back the quickest, I'm going to go with it. So yes.
We got shut out of Square.
Oh yeah, real fast.
As well as we got sent a check back from our bank.
Well, I'm sorry.
How long did it take Square to send you a check back?
4 months.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I got PayPal 180 days from 380, so I thought I was doing well for myself.
I say we had Square our very first week being open, and then the following Monday we did not. We're not able to take credit cards, and then I'd say it took probably about 3 months for them to send us a check for the first week.
I think I had one transaction with Square and then it was shut down immediately.
Yes.
1 weekend.
You got 1 weekend? You know, you did okay then. Yeah.
What they did was they took a look at our website. That's what they did too.
And so like, again, that's a big problem that we have had now as well. And, you know, we again are not cannabis touching, you know, through our company. However, because social media is the only real way for us to advertise, that's a big problem we run into with underwriters is they're going to go and do their due diligence. So they look at our social media, and even if we're tagged in pictures of flower, we're tagged in any of that stuff, that's all reasons for them to deny us, even though we're trying to sell soil. We actually just got banned or taken down on Facebook for a while for a post from 6 months ago promoting Mark's soil that said Commonwealth Canna in it. And they literally stopped our account because of the word canna. Yeah.
I'm not too familiar with like the ancillary side of the cannabis industry, but is there a difference in regulation considering whether your customers are on the like commercial production side of things or more on the hobby grow side of things, or is that not really something you'll have to be concerned about?
I'd say not particularly concerned from a retail standpoint for us. I mean, biggest thing at that point would be if it's a taxed account or not, just for sales tax purposes, directly from us, from supplies.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Any more questions about that? Let's talk about the most fun, hard thing about Virginia and cannabis, and that is the weather and climate. So I recognize quite a few faces in here, so I know a lot of people who have grown in Virginia. But you know, there's faces that I've met today as well. You know, I think we're about to see probably a pretty large influx into the Virginia market as legalization rolls out of you know, some companies that are not necessarily used to Virginia's climate, don't necessarily have the genetics to run in Virginia for it. You know, we are set up, they often say Virginia has a Goldilocks climate, where it's never too hot, it's never too cold. But unlike a lot of states, we do run 4 seasons here. You know, you will, when you get into setting up your facility, you're gonna have to have heating and AC for it. You know, you will run 4 very different climates throughout the year for it. And if you're not running the proper genetics and the proper setup for it, it's gonna cause you a lot of problems with it. There are some great genetics that have been grown in Virginia for quite some time now, that people have climatized towards it. You know, I would implore any companies that are coming into Virginia to, you know, rely on people who have been growing in Virginia for quite some time. I personally have grown in 8 different states, and I can tell you Virginia is one of the hardest out of them.
Wet-tober.
Yes.
Wet-tober. So another fun thing is over the last, I guess this would be year 7, we've grown a lot of varieties on the hemp and the cannabis side. Now, with Peter and his business, he has home growers coming in all the time. So they might pick genetics from a website, from an Instagram post, from Facebook, from their friends. Hey, here, I got some seeds. So he's gathered a tremendous amount of data of what's done well, what hasn't done well. I've been a lot of the trial and error side, where on the hemp side, you can talk to the breeders, you can ask them questions, you can do all of that, but you never know until you put that in the ground. Now, I do think making sure you're looking at where that plant was bred and what the actual longitude and latitude lines are is very helpful. Also seeing that plant in flower and seeing what that plant does when it's in flower in someone else's area is very helpful. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, they're like, all right, well, I need to grow something, what can I grow? And it's like, well, what are you looking for? Yes, sir.
So the challenges of growing here in Virginia and its local terroir, how does that, how do outdoor grow products compare, against other states, let's say California and their growing seasons in Colorado? Like, what does the end product look distinctly different that's like, hey, this is the Commonwealth of Virginia's product?
So look, you can grow the same looking product, right? You can have the same content, you can have the same texture, you can have the same density, the same trichome coverage, everything. I would say the big problem is our environment. I had the pleasure of being in Humboldt in the end of September of 23. The humidity at night was 35%. If you come to Virginia on a September night, the humidity is 80%. Especially if you are growing in a greenhouse or any other type of outdoor setting, your humidity really, really jumps when the sun goes down. So in Virginia, the biggest thing that you really need to make sure of is that, A, I've got a good setup, good airflow, I have the right IPM, I have the right disease management schedules, and you're doing that on a religious basis. That's where you will succeed and where most others will fail. The other thing is if you are growing an outdoor crop in Virginia and you have a license and you have, let's say you have 500 square feet of grow, you need 500 square feet of dry space. They might not tell you that, but you need enough space to put that product in, have the right airflow, have the right humidity, have the right temperature, and be able to dry that product. I'm telling you because I have failed there, where I did not have the right dry setup, but I had the right grow setup. So trying to harvest, hang dry, I run out of space. Or you pack them in too tight, you can't get that humidity to that 60% fast. Because that's really what you need in order to have that higher quality product. When you shut the doors to that dry room and you hit go, it needs to get to that final humidity level quickly and it needs to stay there. So that's one huge aspect of it.
I would say genetic selection and flowering times as well. We tend to, the time where most outdoor crops will be finishing at the end of our grow season is also where we're getting colder temperatures, higher humidity, we're getting hurricane season coming up from Florida, so we're getting a lot of wet. And on top of that, we're getting a lot of caterpillars, especially in an outdoor grow. You are literally asking, if you have a plant that is, 3 weeks from harvesting in that time, you're going to lose a huge portion of that plant. You're going to lose it to bud rot, you're going to lose it to mold, you're going to lose it to mildew, you're going to lose it to high winds for it. So really picking your genetics on that timing and either trying to find something that's going to finish significantly earlier so that you're done and you're drying that time when you're in the worst weather, or finding something that's going to run longer for it so you don't have that really dense bud set at that time to make it easier to mitigate through that timing on it.
There are a lot of fast finishers, like 6-7 week flower times that works really, really well. We are in what is called the transition zone. So if you really look at our climates, everything from the north can kind of grow here, everything from the south can also grow here. So we get, I don't know if it's the best of both worlds, but we get it all.
It's like light depth. It's the best of both worlds and the worst of both worlds at the same time. for it. And then I think the other struggle with it is also just as a state, the diversity, right? Where if you go to Southwest Virginia, you're dealing with a completely different climate than you are if you're in Northern Virginia, which is a completely different climate than if you're in Richmond, than if you're in Virginia Beach for it. So your climate diversity, I mean, we have 3 less agricultural zones than California in a state that's a fifth the size of it for it. So we have a very diverse climate within the state already. And then add on top of that, that we're getting the tail end of weather from the north and tail end of weather from the south.
Yes, sir.
Could you just talk a little bit about navigating the events that you run and maybe the future of cannabis lounges? Do you guys have to apply for special permits or get hounded by the fire marshal or anything like that?
As of right now, no. You know, we do a lot of events, depending. Yeah, we've had some that like had crazy fire spitting and stuff. We dealt with fire marshal for that. For now, I mean, they're mostly insured on private property. I don't know what the law is going to come out with, like consumption lounges or anything like that. That is for someone who pay grade is way above mine. With it, I would love to see that kind of come down. I would love to see a place that adults could meet and share cannabis and consume cannabis together in a safe environment. So I think everyone should talk to their legislators about making that happen. But as of right now, I mean, again, we throw quite a few events at the shop for it. It is private property. We do age restricted to 21 and up, and you know, ensure that there's no cannabis sales, so it's not really a problem.
I do think that consumption lounges are a great option, but also you have to think, a lot of times they'll put that onto each locality. So like the counties get to distinguish what they will or will not have when you go apply for a license. So I think that's going to be a very difficult thing to navigate within the state.
Yeah, you're not selling anything, but people bring it with them themselves and then you trade it.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one.
Yeah.
Evening, fellas. My name is Lonnie Hayes. I just happen to be busted up between the Virginia State Director for and I happen to see in Fredericksburg that there were lounges where you can purchase lounge time, and then in the back you can consume or be shared with cannabis. Have you come across any business models like that, and what are your thoughts on those, especially right now, since not handing out licenses? They selective with the words, it's not gifting, it's sharing, because Virginia doesn't want gifting, but it's a thin line of gray area.
So I know the lounges that you speak of, and for anyone who doesn't know, the way that they are operating is a little bit of a gray area. I think they have very good lawyers on retainer, but basically you go in and you are a member of said club and you are buying X amount of minutes in order to go into the back room and then consume products that, you know, however many minutes you're using might provide that product for you. Is it the way that I would like to operate? No, I would always like to be above board, and anyone can walk in and anyone can be happy with what's going on. So I think it's a struggle, right? Because people need a safe place and they need safe products to consume. So is that, you know, providing that for a few people? Yes, I think it is. But also, what's coming in isn't always regulated. It's regulated by the person at the facility. So that can just be a little tough sometimes. Yeah.
And I think Mark hits on a good point. I think, you know, no matter what level of consumption we're talking about, whether it's you know, the home grower up to you know, an MSO coming into the state and saying a facility, that safety is a big thing that we're all concerned about, right? Because we've all fought for a very long time to get to the point that we are right now. And if anyone thinks that there's not people trying to pull back on the regulation, you're completely wrong. And all it takes is one person getting sick, one person having something seriously wrong happen, for them to put on a poster and claw back any progress we've made for it. So whether it's people growing at home, whether it's, you know, someone setting up a whole facility, no matter what, like, everyone needs to be focused on the safety of the product that we're getting to people. Because again, that's the only way that this is going to continue to move forward.
With places like that as well, it's hard to know what's coming in, right? Where it came from or who it came from. So I think that's the number one piece, is everything that you consume should have a lab test, right? The flower should have been tested, or you knew where the flower was grown. I mean, the Ambrosia crew here, they've got scrubs in their grow rooms. Like, they're putting on scrubs and they're changing their clothes, and they're going in with 100% clean clothes. And when they come out, they're changing them. And that's just to grow hemp. So like, they're making sure that their stuff is 100%. And that way, when it goes to the end consumer, it's the right product. If you're growing something at home or in a facility that isn't licensed, how do you know that product is clean, right? So that's the biggest piece about it, is where are those products coming from for those locations.
And making sure people are getting what they're told they're getting too. You know, there's I'm sure we've all seen, you know, the gas station THCA that, you know, who knows what's inside that pack, right? You know,
that QR code that goes to a COA.
Yeah. You know, Christina 12 website, you can buy this pack for it. You know, and again, I frequently tell myself, you know, while I would love to see this move forward, and I would love to see the state move forward faster and get to a recreational period and all, is that sometimes I have to pause and realize, like, I never thought I would legally be growing cannabis in the state of Virginia either. And sometimes we have to put the brakes on and make sure that we don't move too fast to screw everything up for the future of cannabis in the state.
Well, they've been slowing us down for 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah.
Phew.
It's been a rocket.
Quick question, you know, as a business putting on events, what have you found that's kind of worked and kind of been a community building, and what are some areas you guys just stay the hell away from?
I mean, I'll tell you, we stay the hell away from like pop-ups and things like that. You know, we very much, you know, make it abundantly clear that cannabis will not be sold. You know, we encourage people to share at events with each other. There's a lot of picnic tables. People will sit there and, you know, I grew this, I grew that for it. Share them. We've really kind of found it works to try and just build that community around it, right? Is there are a lot of people that, you know, unfortunately in the state of Virginia, we're going to say that we are all very limited in a home growing community to 4 plants, and we all only grow 4 plants. We would never grow any more than 4 plants for it. And so sometimes you may want, you know, some diversity in flower. Maybe the flower that you grew is not the best for you. So if we can have a you know, an event with a lot of home growers that are coming out, now I would gladly give you some of my flower to get some of your flower for it, right? You know, building up events with community like that. Then I think the key piece to it that we've really found is education, and trying to educate about the plant, educate about growing the plant, bringing people in about different things they can do with the plant. You know, both Mark and Tristan have taught classes at the shop for it, you know, for different parts of either processing or anything else, trying to find, you know, educational pieces where we can bring people together and teach them about it. And then you're naturally going to find other people that are interested in that. So if there's a class on pressing, you know, the people that are going to show up for the free class about pressing, obviously have a shared interest in that. So now they're going to start to, you know, build a community around that. And then we look at the shop more as a way to try and bring those those communities under one larger banner instead.
I think it's pretty cool because when did you guys open? 21?
We opened with legalization, yeah.
So 2021, and that's how I first met them. But when you go to an event there, you have people that are, let's say, 25 years old. You have people that are 35, 45, 55, 65, and 75 years old. And it's all around a shared plant, right? It's kind of amazing to see so many people from different age groups and demographics, and there is nothing but a smile on the entire venue. So if, you know, it takes time, right? But and you need to, you know, kind of cater to that. But what they have at that store really is something special because everyone gets there, everyone's having a good time, and you can see 20, 30, 40 different types of flower that were all grown from home growers. So then you can literally see the craft and just the quality that home growers here in Virginia can create. I mean, we can grow some really good flower and stand up to everyone else in the US. So it's a really cool thing to see. So cater to the home grower community and cater to education. That's how you get them.
I think even if it's not home growers, I think it's still education, you know. I would say I was recently in Chicago and went into a dispensary, and I was very, very impressed with the bud tender and the knowledge that they had about the product, right? They had a passion and they had a knowledge to talk to me about it, and it wasn't just like, that's an indica, you know. They actually wanted to discuss the plant with me. And so even, you know, as we see it open up, I think it's important to see that education from a retail side. I think it's important to make sure that these places are staffed with people that are going to be able to talk about the product. I think it's important they're staffed with growers who are going to have a passion for the plant and care about the plant. You know, the more that they care and they're passionate about it, the better the quality is going to be of it, the better we're going to build that community around it.
Ian, of course, since like 2015, been in the industry for different parts and doing different things, but I just wanted to get you guys' opinion on transferring from small scale grows or growing for research purposes for ancillary organizations, universities, what have you, to mass production personally. And then as a side note, simple best ways to find some quality genetics, possibly in bulk.
Going from a small plant count to a large plant count, know your end goal, right? Know what you can handle, know exactly what you want to finish with. Because if you're going from 4 plants to 180, the time for processing is still the same. If it's 1 plant or if it's 180, it's the same amount of time per plant, right? Because you want the highest product or highest quality product. So factor in first how you want to grow it and what your end result's going to be, then what type of maintenance style do you want? Because if you're going to run hydro, you're going to be basically in that grow and mixing nutrients and feeding and checking drip emitters and doing all of that all the time. If you're in a living style grow, it's a little bit less labor going in. Now, you know, setting up is going to be expensive, but you don't have the breakdown and the reset time in between. It might just be a top dress and a replant. So you really need to think about what your medium is going to be, what your end result's going to be, and really what your facility can handle. Because whether it be HVAC or drains or flood tables or, you know, water in and out of that building, you have to really know what that building is rated for before you even plant that first seed. Now, genetics as far as in mass quantity, usually I try to find a breeder that I like and I just reach out to them directly. If they don't get back to me within 2 days, they don't want my business, you know? And what you really want to say is, hey, I grow in a light depth greenhouse. I do 3 runs per year. I have LEDs or I have supplemental lighting, and I'm growing in soil or I'm growing in cocoa, whatever that is. And I want to be growing for extraction, or I want to be growing for solventless, or I'm growing for flower. What strains do you make that would be right for me?
In Virginia.
In Virginia.
Obviously.
Yes. So that's the biggest thing, is find some varieties that you like, find a breeder that you like, and reach out to them.
I mean, I would say from the breeder's standpoint on it, you know, it's going to be trial and error from the beginning, right? Once you get, you know, a solid run or two under your belt, though, I have found if you find a breeder that will run good in your system, generally most genetics from that breeder will run good in your system for it. You know, you got to think that breeders are choosing their genetics based off of what does best in the system that they grow in. So if you're new to an area, I would try and find either a breeder that's going to grow very similar to how you grow. For an indoor facility, for an outdoor facility, I would definitely look for someone that's in the region that you're growing in.
The other thing is take notes. So just every day, if you jot down 3 bullet points of what you did, what was good, what was bad, at the end of that grow, you can come back and you can say, all right, here's where I failed, here's where I succeeded, here are the steps I can take to make sure that doesn't happen again. I would say that has been probably the best thing that I could have ever done, is I had pages of notes for every grow. So I can still look back to grows from 21 and be like, oh dang, okay, I did try that and it did not work. So that's a huge part.
My biggest lesson that I would say, kind of looking at the big picture of scaling up to a larger situation, would be, you know, you always want that perfect success in what you've experienced already. But as you said, with the IPM routine and being, you know, on point with that all the time, it's like you got to think about that in scale. It's like it could be twice as bad. You get twice as much exposure, you know, to your pests, your powdery mildew, your molds, and contaminants that can get in. So you have to do twice as much work on that. And really, as much as you plan for success and want that success, you also have to plan for catastrophe and/or fail points, whether it be, you know, losing power with a winter storm, or whether it being a unstable genetic that, you know, hey, half of everything needs to just be chopped out to save the other half. You know, prepare for that self-sacrifice to carry what you can go on, and also, you know, don't be afraid to, you know, cut down the plants that you need to, so that the others survive and thrive. You know, if you're going into hydro, like if you've done that, you know, with your 4 plants indoors, you know how quickly a hydro plant grows and veges out, and you can cut every single leaf off of that plant. And then 2 days later, you're like, I swear I cut every leaf off of this plant, and you're flooded with humidity and leaves everywhere. So you think about that on scale and how much time it takes to go in and defoliate a hydro grow, and you need to think that you're probably going to have to scale manpower to take care of it all. So grow in increments to do it safely, so that you can keep it under control and avoid catastrophe.
I think Tristan brings up an excellent point with the manpower on it, right? Is as you're scaling, you know, Mark said it before that it's just as much work for every single plant. So if you were going from 4 plants to 50 plants, then, you know, if you do not have people that you can trust alongside you to help you with that, you're, you know, quadrupling your work at that point on it too, right? So also understand what your intention is in scaling up, right? Your intention of, are you trying to produce the most flour? Are you trying to pheno out those things? Are you trying to do grow for hash to process everything? Like understanding what your intention is going to very much, you know, if it's just yield you're looking for, you could get the same yield off of running fewer plants that are just larger yielders, right? For it. So like just be smart and have that proper game plan going into it when you're scaling it up.
One last thing I'd say is, if if you're looking at scaling up, looking at consulting or advice, is definitely reach out locally. Not just to plug everybody that's up here, but with the environmental challenges that we do have here locally, that is one thing. Is you want somebody with experience in that to be able to provide you the best information possible.
Yeah, I'll shamelessly plug everyone up here and then other people in the room too. There's a lot of amazing growers in this state, all over the state, not just in the Richmond area. For it, if you are looking for advice, feel free to contact, I think, any of the three of us. We can get you in touch with someone who is in your area or the area you're looking for that can definitely help you with it.
I've probably made most of the mistakes you can make. So yeah, I
We
can
have
definitely.
warehouses to prove it. How not to grow.
Yeah, I have pictures to prove it too. So yes, if we can help, I would love to help someone not make the mistakes that I made. We can actually talk about it. When we first started growing, you couldn't call someone and be like, "Hey, I have this issue."
Free advice.
Free advice, or
First hour's free.
Yeah, first hour's free, Ronnie.
Second hour's double.
Back then it used to be, "Hey, I got these tomato plants and they're looking like this." Now we can actually talk freely. So I mean, that's a huge step in the right direction.
Thank you to NORML for that.
Send pictures without being scared.
Yeah.
And I think that's our time.
Hey, everyone, please.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for day one of the, I'll just sit right here, Virginia Cannabis Conference. We'll be back here tomorrow for day two, of course, in person and live on the internet. I hope you enjoyed this. The expo hall is going to be open until about 6 o'clock, so grab your stuff. If you want a silent auction, please pick that up in the back and pay over there. And if you're coming to the gala, we'll see you back here tonight at 7. Thanks so much.